Good evening. City of Belfast, public hearing 1, council chambers, Belfast City Hall, September 4th, 2012.
In accordance with Title 28A, Section 653, MRSA 1964, this public hearing is to hear an application by J&G Incorporated, doing business as Darby's Restaurant, located at 155 High Street, for renewal malt, spiritus, and vinous restaurant class liquor license, interior only.
Proponents? Seeing none, I call the hearing closed.
Public hearing number 2. This public hearing is to discuss an application being submitted to the State of Maine CDBG program for a $200,000 Economic Development Program grants for municipalities for direct business support for gap financing. The purpose of this grant application is to allow Front Street Shipyard to purchase equipment and make improvements to the former Belfast Boatyard property located at 39 and 41 Front Street. Public comments will be solicited at this hearing and will also be submitted as part of the application. All persons wishing to make comments or ask questions about the grant application are invited to do so at this time.
Proponents?
Yes.
I know Mayor's freaking out about one.
You're just going to keep hitting me until I get up. J.B. Turner, Front Street Shipyard, Warren, Maine. On behalf of Front Street Shipyard, the reason we're seeking these funds is to continue the improvements that we've started down at the yard. In some cases, at the facility that we have now, where we'd be putting in a paint booth, because right now we have just a makeshift wall with some filter banks in it for our painting, spray painting. And then the other part of the grant monies would be used towards improvements over on the Belfast Boatyard site, which actually is owned by John Holmes. And what we want to do is, because of the deep water frontage right alongside there, we want to be able to put in a crane pad and have a crane, mobile crane, which these funds would also help purchase, so we can unstep large masts there and lay them down, much like anybody who was down at the yard this past weekend saw the 110-foot mast laying on the ground, and we'll be unstepping a 115-footer tomorrow. So that type of mast takes up a lot of space. So we're looking to be able to set up right there alongside, and then take the building that Alex uses currently for his workshop and move it back away from the water. And then monies would also go towards that. So that's the outline of the basic 4 parts of the project.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alan Fishman. I'm a resident of Belfast, Maine since 1995. I am a proponent of what the Front Street Shipyard is building in our city. I think it's a tremendous boon to the city and to all the citizens. I do have a concern, however, that relates to the fact that these are going to be public funds that are going to be used to help renovate the shipyard. I think that I've been a client of the Belfast Boatyard for 17 years, and I understand completely, believe me, I understand completely why that particular part of the waterfront needs to be renovated. I mean, there's no question, having been a client there, and also a client of the boatyard up on Route 137, which is a storage facility. My concern, however, is that a number of people that I know are not particularly financially able to meet some of the new price points that are being offered by the Front Street Shipyard. And I would say that we have benefited from the Belfast Boatyard because it has been undervalued in the marketplace. Having had boats in other parts of the United States, I can testify to the fact that Alex Turner has actually been undervaluing the amount of costs and money that clients have paid, even Southern Maine, even Wayfarer, even down in other parts of the city. But because there are public funds involved, I think that it's incumbent on the city to make sure that those people who have been long-term participants in the harbor as boaters and are given some kind of understanding and sensitivity in approving of this grant, if you do so, approving the application for this grant, and that there perhaps could be some accommodation made between the Front Street Shipyard and the city about some short-term accommodation for those people. I understand that it's a business model that needs to succeed. I understand that there should not be an unfair advantage given to people who are not part of the client base at this point, or who have moorings, or who are on floating docks. But it would be really, I think, important for the city to consider that these are public monies, that this is a public good that is being requested by the Front Street Shipyard, and that it would be, as part of your deliberations, some kind of accommodation might be made where people who have financial need can in some way apply for a discount or apply for some kind of a amelioration over the short term while they're able to redo their plans. Tomorrow's the 5th of September. It's the day when the boatyard is going to be turned over to the Front Street Shipyard, and I have personally not I received a letter, but I do not know what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't know exactly who I call now if my propeller falls off, but I guess I'll find out. But anyway, that's what I wanted to say. I want to make it clear, however, that I really am favorable about the whole development of the waterfront. Friends of mine are already in the Front Street Shipyard and love it and find the services really superior and exemplary. So I compliment the organization, and in a way just concerned about the fact that we have public monies now involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Brianna Bebb. I live in Belfast, and I'm here on behalf of our town, Belfast. I just wanted to say that we've already seen the good that Front Street Shipyard has done for the downtown area, and we're eager to hear more about this project, and we'd like to invite any of the public that wants to hear more about it. There will be a presentation at our board meeting next Wednesday night. There'll be an agenda item to hear more about this proposal. So anyone is welcome to come to that, and we're certainly interested in hearing more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Thomas Kittredge, Economic Development Director, City of Belfast. I just want to briefly mention we also received supportive written comments from the Belfast Area Chamber of Commerce, as well as Ken and Martha Ortman of 76 Front Street, and Marcy and Harold Richardson of 39 Union Street in Belfast. All were overwhelmingly in support of this project and wanted to express their support for this grant application. And Jenica was given a copy of these to put in the public hearing minutes.
Anyone else on this? Seeing none, I call hearing closed. City of Belfast, regular council meeting, number 5. Call to order. Roll call.
Mayor Walter Ash Jr.
Present.
Councilors Marina DeLune. Here. Roger Lee. Here. Eric Sanders. Here. Michael Hurley.
Here.
Nancy Hamilton. Here. City Manager Joseph Slocum.
Present.
And myself, Assistant to the City Manager Jennifer Lundy.
Pledge of allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Need a motion to adopt the agenda.
I just wanted to add, somewhere late in the agenda, whenever it's convenient, I sent out a discussion item about allowing adventure travel to set up 6 or 8 tents in Heritage Park. So if we could do that, that'd be great. Discuss it somewhere.
How about J1? I have a couple of additions as well, and I guess I want to preface this by saying I did talk to one council member who really said he would like to be out here by 9:30 tonight, so I'll understand if we can put these on or can't. One is a request from the harbor master to get the council to apply for a boating infrastructure grant that would allow us to replace the fuel lines down at the harbor. And that would be D1. The second is a request from the city planner to request amending the operational policy and master plan agreement with the Front Street Shipyard to afford the opportunity for bicycles to ride on the path. That would, I would recommend, be C1. I guess I would like J2 to be a consideration of a request to send a letter of support for the Stan Oil High Wind project to the PUC. I got that request in last Friday. And finally, J3 would be a request by myself to go into executive session to discuss union matters, union negotiations under the statute. And I guess somewhere along the line, we need some direction on design review when we want to have that work session. But that's not an agenda. Nancy, you read something?
No. Move we accept the agenda as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? So vote. Okay, acceptance of the minutes of regular council meeting of August 21st, 2012, and special council meeting of August 28th, 2012. Need a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Okay, open to the public. Please state your name and where you're from. This is your opportunity, folks, if you've got something you'd like to say. Communications. Well,
Good. A couple of things. We're looking at the intersection of Route 1 and 141. We've met with DOT. Jamie's working on some options. We're talking about the possibility of having maybe a work session on September 25th. I believe that's a Tuesday with the council, if that's acceptable. I know that Councilor Lee might not make it, but we could 6:30 work session. Is that acceptable?
I won't be able to make it because
You-
there's soccer practice.
Okay.
There's a small chance I might not be able to make it. I probably will, but there's,
Well, we're trying to, our goal is to try and find a time when we can schedule a work session to discuss these options. As I understand it, we want to look at the options, and the state tells us whether or not it falls within funding, approved funding, and then pick from the ones that do and go with that game plan. So we may have to look for another date, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, either city council or youth soccer through middle of October. Monday nights, I have the RSU 20 withdrawal thing through late October, at least. So Friday nights are it.
What time is soccer?
Well, dark, so it's conceivable, yeah.
Perhaps a little later on Tuesday, the 25th?
Well, 7 would be,
Or 7?
7 would be amendable, because surely it's going to be dark by,
Marina, what?
if I can't make it, I don't have to be here. I don't think that I'm not going to be available, but
so 7 would be okay, Joe.
Okay. We're also trying to schedule a work session on the downtown and waterfront master plan for sometime in the first week of October, where we can reconvene with the committee and the consultant and kind of figure out where we go from there. The Tuesday, October 2nd is a council meeting, and I imagine a work session with the consultant is going to take more than an hour. Did you say that, Wayne? So that's probably not a good night to have the work session.
I probably won't make that council meeting. I'm going to be gone that first week.
I'm leaving on the 4th. And I'm gone through till the 9th.
What does Monday, the 1st, look like at 7 o'clock? You
I have the withdrawal committee.
Shoot meeting.
usually at 6:30 here.
Wayne, do you think we can do this work session in an hour?
Sir, I think that's more good. Second Tuesday of the month?
The 9th?
If that's acceptable to people.
Sure.
Okay.
I can probably go at 6:30 by then.
Okay, let's think about work session October 9th, 6:30 PM on the downtown and waterfront master plan. Also, I just want to let you know, we are working on updating that handicap accessibility ordinance, and we'll have that here in October. Our theme is, I want to make sure we're on the same page as we're drafting it, that we're asking businesses that can reasonably accommodate in the city to do so with at least a portable ramp.
6 inches or less.
Okay, that's exactly what I needed to know. Thank you very much. We'll have that here for your first reading and second reading in October.
And to include a sign saying that it's available.
Very good.
Wilton.
Mike?
For those of you who didn't notice it, we put in a permanent ramp at the Colonial with like feathered edges all three ways, and it used to only be, it was a step about that big, and people for the last 17 years have been falling out and falling in. Forget the people who are on wheelchairs. We put that in, and it's completely not a problem at all. Again, it makes you wonder why it takes 17 years to do something.
I have a couple of items. The Maine Board of Pesticide Control and the Maine Department of Agriculture and the Maine Department of Environmental Protection are partnering to provide homeowners a free opportunity to dispose of old pesticides. You do need to register by September 28th, but you can go to www.thinkfirstspraylast.org or the Maine Board of Pesticides to get details about registering any pesticides you might have that would like to get rid of for free. And then also want to announce that there's a Grow Smart Maine Summit that's being held on October 23rd at the Augusta Civic Center. If any counselors would like to attend, I'd be happy to register you. Their focus is improving Maine's economy, revitalizing downtowns, and conserving our working and natural landscapes.
Mike? We got our packet over the weekend, and I got it open, and we had this little flyer, which was spread out to us by, I don't know where it came from, but it was, it's How Does Agenda 21 Affect You? And it's from the John Birch Society. Kind of a notable extreme far-right hate group. They're pretty much out of the hate business now. They're just in the crazy business. And at first I was really offended that this would even be put in my mailbox. And, I said, can't we have a waste paper basket for garbage like this? And as I read this thing, and I urge people to look up Agenda 21 if you want to see the kind of craziness that the rats in the outhouse are up to, being totally obsessed with something as pathetic as equal rights for rocks that were enacted by the United Nations. It's a joke, and I guess I prefer to laugh at it than get angry about it, but I do draw the line. If the Ku Klux Klan drops off anything, I don't want it. So, appreciate it. That's one. The elections, we had an angry mob here, and they lasted at least a couple of meetings. I give them a lot of patience for having done that. That level of perseverance is impressive. And now we have 2 empty seats on the school board, and it's really ridiculous. We need Belfast representatives on that school board, and I really certainly hope people would step up and just do it. It's not that hard, and it would, instead of being angry about your taxes or the cost of your education, you would be able to do your town some good. And now you don't even have to be elected, you can just be appointed. So, and lastly, there's Wienerfest is coming to town. I don't know how many years it's been, but town's going to be invaded by Dachshunds on Sunday. Another big weekend for Belfast, so that's great. Thank you.
Mike's fine.
Okay.
So, I hear a lot of talk about it's hard to do anything on the cheap in Belfast, or things are costing a lot, or all this new swag is in town, right? So lots of businesses and lots of money, tourist season. So I hear a lot of, what about working class folks and things like that? Well, I'm here to tell you, you may not think I'm working class, but I am. Yesterday, and there's a police officer in the house, so I have to be careful with my wording of this, but Labor Day, down at the waterfront, opposite the Weather Vane parking lot, in, I guess, a sublet of Heritage Park, next to the homeless guy who lives down there, there's a beautiful barbecue grill that after I scraped these cigarette butts out of it and stuff, we were able to have about 30 families for the cost of barbecue in a bag, and everybody brought some meat and some beverages, and played Frisbee, and the kids chased each other, and it cost us about $10. So all I'm saying is utilize your city parks. When in doubt, they're usually available. People were streaming in, having pizzas, walking around. It was a beautiful Labor Day, and, wonderful. Didn't cost much at all. Encourage people to do that more often. Go down and have dinner at the water. Take your dinner with you.
I just mentioned that we emptied all of the city garbage cans on Friday,
Yeah.
Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, because we were that busy.
Nothing. I just want to mention, not to forget the Lions Club at 9/11 on the walk on the bridge. Everybody should, all of us should attend that if we can. I usually do. Anyone else?
Thank you, welcome.
Yeah. Old business and council committee reports? None? Permits, petitions, and license, consent agenda. Discussion? None, take it to a vote. All in favor? Aye. It's a vote. Consideration of a recommendation from the Cemetery Board of Trustees to offer the newly restored cemetery chapel for service at a rental fee of $150.
There are two representatives, or three representatives of the trustees here tonight, so. Two.
I'm not a trustee.
You're involved in so many other things, I get confused.
Right.
First, I was up there over the weekend. Just happened to drive by, and it's amazing what they've done with that chapel. It's it was a beautiful little building that I think was a little bit neglected, and it is not neglected at this point. And really, hats off to people who have done that. Thank you. So I make a motion that we approve that.
Second.
Discussion? Answer.
I just had some questions, Joe. How's that going to be administered? How will that work if someone wants to rent the chapel?
Through Steve Bogan, the way you could make any arrangement at the cemetery.
Okay. And I assume it will be that will be publicized through the website and other means?
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and funeral directors will know about it, and churches and so
Yes.
forth? Okay. And that's been a large project. It's taken the board, I know, a lot of energy, and Steve's done an outstanding job with it. But I have a couple of other cemetery concerns. One is that the roads in the spring, some of them are not good, and I just wondered if maybe now that this is out of the way, if there could be a plan, like a 5-year plan, like he has with the trees, so that the roads can be renovated. And also, I don't think that the signage on other small cemeteries is really that adequate, and I'm wondering if perhaps that's something that they could move along and address next.
The signage on the other smaller cemeteries in Belfast? Okay. I will refer that both to the trustees as well as to Steve Bogan.
Okay. I got a motion and a second. All in favor? Consideration of a request from the Economic Development Director for the authority to apply for a community development block grant on behalf of the Front Street Shipyard.
Good evening, Thomas Kittredge, Economic Development Director. Back at your July 3rd meeting, you approved the submission of a letter of intent to the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG Economic Development Program, for a $200,000 grant to directly assist Front Street Shipyard in making improvements to the former Belfast Boatyard facility. We had a public hearing earlier tonight about that. That letter of intent was approved on August 16th, the application for which is due September 14th. I am working directly with Front Street Shipyard staff to put that grant application together. As part of the application packet, there is a standard council resolution that authorizes and directs the city manager to submit an application, authorizes the city manager to make assurances on behalf of the city of Belfast required as part of such applications, and is authorized and directed upon acceptance of these funds to carry out the duties and responsibilities of this program. I'd be happy to answer any questions about the grant or the project. J.B. Turner, the plant manager, is here as well to answer any questions you might have about the project.
Roger.
Well, I think what probably is on a lot of people's minds is, how could it be that an organization, private organization such as Front Street Shipyard, with the sort of financial backing that it obviously has, and success that it's having, or so it seems to be having in the private economy, apply for a federal grant?
Well, technically the grant, the city is the actual applicant on behalf of Front Street Shipyard. This is one of the few actual grant programs that can directly benefit or assist a private entity. They are required to match the money with a one-to-one match. They'll be matching with at least $200,000 of their own funds. They'll be required to create at least 7 full-time positions. They're proposing to do 10 of those. And they need to make the case that they need the money. The state's not going to give them the money if they don't need it. They're required to provide extensive financial documentation about the ownership as well as the current operating income of the shipyard, and they're putting that together on their own. I believe their finances have changed since their first phase of their expansion. Maybe JB could mention that specifically, but the state would need to be convinced that they do need the money to make this project happen, and we're putting that case together.
Could you amplify what you mean by need the money?
That it could not take place without getting this grant. That's the case we're making.
Marina?
I think we asked this before, but if the city of Belfast receives this grant, because we are the entity receiving it, will it make us ineligible for other community development block grants, economic development block grants?
We will have to sit 1 year out only for the economic development sub-program. Other community development block grants will be unaffected, but my understanding is we cannot get 2 economic development grants in a row in consecutive years under that particular sub-program. That's the current regulations. That may be changing, but that's my understanding of the current regulations, last time I checked them.
Some of those grants can be quite large.
No, this would not affect, for example, this would not affect downtown revitalization or community enterprise or housing assistance. This would not affect any of those programs, only economic development. The new program statement for all the programs is going to come out in the next few weeks, and I'll double check to make sure and see if anything is changing with that, but that's been the way it has in the past. You'd have to sit 1 year out just for economic development if we were able to get this one.
Roger?
And in the past, what grants has the city received that have been economic development grants?
13 years.
Yeah, I think we never had an economic development program sub-grant. We've gotten downtown revitalization, we've gotten housing, we've gotten planning, public infrastructure, but we've never gotten economic development one. That's been around for several years. The sub-programs do change from time to time under CDBG, but looking over the records, we have not got one of those in the past.
I need a motion?
I make a motion we approve the, going forward with the application.
Second.
Second? Any more discussion? Nancy?
I have a question. So the purpose of these economic development program grants is to assist private enterprise with infrastructure that will directly relate to hiring new employees. Is that correct?
In the past, for some of other grants, we've talked about meeting a national objective that the federal government mandates. In the past, for example, our downtown revitalization grant, that's to eliminate slum and blight conditions. In this case, the national objective that we're going to be meeting is benefiting low and moderate income people. Of these, if the grant is successful and they get this money, they'll be required to they're proposing to create 10 jobs. 51% of those, or 6 of them, rounding up, would have to be going to people of low and moderate income households, and that's done through surveys to meet the benefit and meet the requirements of the grant. And we'd work with them to put those procedures in place so they were able to hire from those groups. But that's how the national objective for that particular sub-program is met.
Mike, then Roger.
You know, I don't know the ins and outs of the Front Street Shipyard's finances, but I think that they would even want to go through this, through this process of revealing everything to people who are going to look at the numbers, would indicate a certain, that you have to be willing to do that, and usually means you probably just don't have a whole lot of extra $200,000 chips laying around. I think that's a lot of money. I think it's, if the federal government thinks it's a good idea to spend that money, I support it. I think it's a good, you know, they've done a great job, and hopefully this will, especially the problem of getting the masks out, to be terrific.
I'd like to, JB, if you could just take a few minutes and address the concern that the individual who spoke during earlier. I'm not, I mean, I think his concern is one that's on the minds of probably many people in the community. I'm not sure that it's relevant to the question before us tonight, but I think you should address it if you can.
I can do the best I can. I mean, there are, and I completely understand that when we come in and we're changing our rate schedule, which is basically bringing it in line with all the other competition around the area. We're not more expensive than Wayfair or Lyman Morris or Hodgson or Hinckley or any of those other yards of equal or even a little bit, well, equal size, let's say. And we're very competitive with the further afield, if you go down to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, which is why some of the big boats are coming up to visit us, because Newport pricing is just gone out of control. So that said, I do understand when there's a big jump for everybody that it's an issue that comes up. And I can also say that we're intending to invest, to go back a little bit about why we would need the money. You know, we have an initial loan that was in place to build out Front Street Shipyard as it is today. The funds to purchase Belfast Boatyard are coming from the owners individually, and that's just, and then Alex is financing the rest of it himself, because we're at the end of our loan ability with that investor. We can't get any more loans. So Alex is going to finance the remainder amount due, and there are considerable improvements that have to take place on that property. We have estimates for $125,000 just to get the electrical up to code down in the waterfront. Another estimate is coming in to get the electrical up to code up on 137. There's got to be improvements to the buildings and such. So the cost to the shipyard and to its owners is considerable, and that raises the bar for having to have rates set where they are, because we have to be competitive. Our costs go up, and we don't have any way of just absorbing that. It has to go out to the customers, spread out over the general group of them. We held for our customers, our initial customers at the marina this past season, we intentionally kept our rates a little lower because with first season people, we didn't want to jump them tremendously. And we may, and I can't speak for all of us tonight, be able to do something like that. There will be increases. It may be a little bit less, but it's because it has to, because the costs are much greater. Our overhead costs are much greater than Alex, and they're just getting added onto continuously as we try and bring that facility and all of its issues over the years up to code so that we can operate safely and provide a good service for our customers, including new floats, electrical, water. I mean, the whole thing has to be upgraded, and that costs money.
This is just a suggestion. It's not anything that would be a requirement, but it would be nice if full-time residents of Belfast had some kind of a discount. It's just a suggestion. And the other thing is, I would be really disinclined to support this grant, recognizing that it precludes us from applying for another economic development grant that might be a much larger grant. But I wanted to let you know, just tonight, I watched the video that Ned did of the TIF and found out a little bit about what you've been doing. And I have to just say that I'm really impressed with what you're doing for our community.
Thank you.
And so I support this grant.
Thank you.
Mike, Ben Ramsey?
I guess I just think in terms of nature abhors a vacuum. Alex had his business for sale. I can tell you, Alex has been a friend of mine for many, many years, and, the guy's ready to retire, and it's a real blessing for him that he has the ability to sell that business, probably at a decent profit, and I think that's terrific. But somebody's got to pay for that, and I think that's going to be the people who pull up in their boats. If we want to extend discounts to Belfast residents, we have Thompson's Wharf, we have the public landing, and we've got more space if we wanted to. I mean, if that's what we wanted to do, and I'm not saying that's what I want to do. But I called up to get my little, I asked Kathy how much, if I wanted to put my little 15, 16-foot little motorboat on the Thompson's Wharf. It's like $1,500 for the summer. So if you want to do a discount, I'm all for that, because I can't afford it. And I just think that if their prices go up too high, it will really encourage either at consumers or at French and Webb, both of whom own waterfront property, to have that competitive edge. So, yeah, I think those are two. That's just a natural state. So.
We all have seen the shipyard and talked about how it has drawn tourists, the looky-loos, and how the Front Street area and the Harbor Walk are going to benefit the town. But when I found out about Front Street Shipyard, what I thought of first was jobs. And a lot of the jobs in the shipyard are, by its very nature, are specialized. And I think this is a real opportunity for people in Belfast who are maybe able to get a job for the, for the first time in a long time, or be able to get a job closer to home when they've been traveling for a long time. I think it's an excellent program, and if the federal government wants to give us money for almost shovel-ready jobs, then I think that's wonderful.
I think that is a unique aspect of the grant is, again, it's a subset grant, which if we get it, we won't be able to get that type of specialized grant again for a year, but it doesn't withhold us from getting almost any other type of economic development grant. So I think the jobs are very important too. I think you've been upfront and proactive in every business decision, and I think you've looked to us for direction whenever possible. And I go back to you wanted to move to Belfast because you liked the town the way it was. And so there's a trust factor there too. I think you're dealing with international customers as well as people that live in Belfast, Maine. I think Alex Turner and his customers who were loyal to him and his rates, when he chose to sell the business to you, that decision was made, and you'll do the best you can. I hope it doesn't sound like you're doing any price gouging or anything like that. But in the international, I mean, I'm hearing up to the British government may ask there for a 20% wealth tax. There's been a lot of British flags on yachts coming in. So the international pitfalls of owning a yacht may get you some business, may lose you some business. That's your risk to take. But I've been really pleased. And if you feel, and if Thomas feels, that you guys feel that this is a good idea, I support it. And I don't know if you'll get it, but you never know unless you try. So good luck to you, and keep up the good work. Thank you.
Okay, any more discussion?
Roger.
I'd like to give the proponent of, is it Mr. Fishman?
Yeah, Alan Fishman.
I'm just concerned that we're not giving sufficient consideration to his request, and I think, I mean, it's all, basically, as I understand his request, and I'd like him to amplify it if he can, he's saying, basically, in return for our support of this grant, we ought to ask the shipyard to do something, at least for a few years, to deal with the fact that there are lots of residents of this area that are going to see their boatyard bills go way up. Now, maybe we shouldn't do anything, but I'm just not, the thing, it has bothered me, in part because I'm one of those customers, but I'm probably not the average, and I just would like one of you to tell me that I shouldn't worry about it, if you think that.
I'd be happy to take a shot at that. These are federal tax dollars, and they come from everybody.
Yeah.
And I think they ought to benefit the general good of the community as opposed to a few people who have boats at Belfast Boatyard. And so that would seem like a little odd to me. I'd rather they did something like, I don't know what, but I just think it's either we support it or we don't.
Well, if I could, because I know Mr. Fishman from school board days, so he's been nothing but a loyal patron of the city of Belfast and the school district, and his son, I believe, is a freshman at Princeton.
Yeah.
So, kudos to you, and I think your concerns are articulated well, and I think JB is somebody you guys should talk right after this meeting and get more information. JB's impression is they're trying to do everything they can not to upset the apple cart too much, but that the bottom line is they got to spread it out. But these are the citizens of Belfast who have been loyal to us long before the shipyard got here. So I'm a proponent of asking for the federal money and working with the customers as best you can. So, I think the world of Mr. Fishman, so, it's a good man.
I guess the way I see it is that I think the shipyard should do something for those customers, but I don't see this grant as being something we should hold up, we should in fact try to change to work that. It's, as Mike has said, it's federal money, it's available. We're not foregoing anything. We haven't applied for an economic development grant apparently in 13 years. So the city's not losing anything. We're going to take advantage of the availability of federal money, and I'll support it. But as I say, I think something should be done, and I don't exactly know what it ought to be, but there are some folks, some really, folks who don't have a whole lot of money, but they have been having Belfast Boatyard haul their boat, and I think they're going to have a hard time paying your fees, and I think what's going to happen actually is they're going to find probably they can't afford it, and they're going to have to go to some other boatyard, somewhere like one of those yards. There's one up the Penobscot, way up there, and Winterport or something, and I don't know, maybe that's what we had to expect would happen when, when we have such a high-flying organization such as yours, which has done so much good for the city. But when it came, we should have expected it, but I don't know, it's a downside to, it's
Yeah, it was a purchase and sales agreement it allocated to us to sell the business.
I agree.
So if we had sold it to Wayfair and Ring, what's the difference? Or if we sold it to Hinckley or...
Valid point, yeah. It had to happen, is what you're saying, yeah.
Well, he wanted it to happen. It wasn't like we came and said, Jesus, Alex, we've got to have this. He said, hey, I'm tired, I'm ready to retire.
But I think our point, Julie, is that if somehow Front Street Shipyard can leap that bridge, even though they're purchasing it, and still somehow, I go back to what you said, you like Belfast the way it is. Mr. Fishman and his boat was here when you like Belfast the way it is, and they don't want to have to go to Winterport or anything. And we're not telling you what to do, but I just think it makes good long-term business sense if you can just double-check to see if there's any wiggle room in Belfast residents or people that have had their boats down there for a long time. And if not, clearly.
Well, like I said, we did this past year with the rates.
You have to speak in the microphone. I'm sorry, but people at home can't hear you. Please.
Well, as I said before,
This past season, we looked at the people that were our first-year customers and didn't jump it as far, so, perhaps we can look at something like that.
But,
Nancy, you had something?
yeah. Roger wanted to know why, he wanted sort of a reason or an analogy. If this money were going to Matthews Brothers to create 10 new jobs, I don't think we would be debating how much Matthews Brothers should charge for their windows.
Right. That's true.
I think you're right.
And although I do understand, that this is a shock for long-term residents and who've been in the boatyard.
Is it possible to just speak briefly?
I'd like that. Sure.
I want to reiterate that I am fully in support of what's happening with the Front Street Shipyard. I've also already signed my contract to have my boat hauled by the Front Street Shipyard. I haven't yet gotten a guarantee. In the letter that was sent, I did not get a guarantee that I would have dock space next year. I am willing to pay the new rates. It's not it's not an issue that personally affects me the way it affects other people. It's a little different than what Michael was talking about in terms of this is an existing boatyard. And Alex didn't just serve people at the dock. He served anybody who came into this town who had a boat on a mooring, who needed help, who needed work, and so forth. So he was actually the Front Street Shipyard before there was the Front Street Shipyard. His prices just happened to be a lot lower. And I understand, I came from shipyards, boatyards down, they call them marinas, in Long Island, so to me, it was, one of the reasons I moved to Maine was I couldn't afford the marina I was in. We looked for a boatyard before we bought our house, as an example. I'm a little concerned in this discussion about one aspect. If they don't get the grant, then what happens to that particular parcel of land, and is there a contingency plan B? Is there some, I assume you would own it but do less work, or, I mean, I'd like to know a little bit, because those docks then still remain there, and would there be service on those docks? What it would be the situation, because I have applied for about 50 grants, and you don't always get them. And my wife applies for grants, and she doesn't always get them. So just a little bit of maybe clarification about what happens in the case that this grant is not approved for whatever the reasons are.
Well, I think it would be, we still have, we have our matching half that we have to match the 200,000 with. So we just scale everything back and look at our priorities to where we could use that 200, and that's all we do. There are some things we have to do just for safety's sake, and then the rest of it we'll have to wait till we can make the money.
Kathy, you wanted to say something?
If I could, real quick.
Harbor Master?
All right.
Yes.
Yes, we have had a lot of people in our office from Belfast Boatyard. They're customers, very concerned. I've talked to Joe briefly about it a few weeks ago. They do have options, and in a sense, they are supporting the other smaller boatyard businesses in the area, like Mid-Coast Marine or Dan Miller, who runs a charter boat and has just opened Beaumont Boatworks. So in a sense, the shipyard is really helping everybody. I'm sure JB doesn't want to hear that everybody is going to other places, but that is in essence what's happening. But part of this also will mean, which I've already talked to the Harbor Committee briefly about, that the city needs to look a little bit later on this winter when we start looking at what we want for commercial businesses on the harbor, including those smaller businesses, how we provide support for them in landside support or moorings or that sort of thing. You know, Dan Miller came to me and said he needs moorings for his boats. Well, this is a whole new era for the harbor, so there's going to be a lot of working things out. But I know a lot of the boatyard customers really would like to stay here, but there's a big difference between a yard that employs 10 or 15 people and a yard that employs 100 people. And that overhead is all the difference. So you can't have everything, but you know, there are smaller businesses that are really being helped as this process goes. So.
Yeah, is there anything we could do to, as a city, to change our facilities, or in some way that would make it possible for the smaller boatyard that the guy who can't afford Front Street needs to work on his boat? Because we've got that nice ramp, but maybe I just missed it, but I've never seen a crane come down and pull a mast out of a boat sitting in the city.
I would like to, at some point this winter, have a workshop with the council so we can look at what the city facilities are. I think it's very important, my own opinion, is that first we focus on the public use that we should be providing, because we are a public entity, and that's really important. Where we have the shipyard here now, it fills in a lot of gaps that we had tried to fill in before. Maybe we don't need to anymore, but at the same time, we have more people that want to use the harbor, like the smaller businesses that don't have any place in the harbor to set up or come boating, you know. So there's a lot to think about, and I think it would be really good for everybody in the council and the Harbor Committee to get together at some point and really look at what we have and what we can do to help people, and it will mean changes.
Okay, good idea.
Kathy.
I'd like to correct something that was said. it isn't true that the city is not giving up anything. We don't know what economic development grants might be coming in the next year. Some of these economic development grants can be quite high. The fact that we haven't benefited from any of them in the past doesn't mean, actually makes it more likely that we would be eligible should one show up. And we've benefited from an awful lot of the other kinds of grants, and I don't know if that makes us less likely to receive one of that kind of grant in the future. But what I would say is that, yes, the city could be potentially giving up an opportunity, and because of that, I just hope that the shipyard will take that into consideration. I would really like to see a differential of some kind between full-time Belfast residents and those who are not full-time residents, and that's all I'm going to say.
Just to clarify, the only program that this grant would affect is the exact same program, Community Development Block Grant, Economic Development Program, not any other agency or entity providing economic development-related grants. Only this particular sub-program is affected by whether or not the city and Front Street gets this particular grant. That's the only one. So just to clarify that.
Okay, any more discussion on this? Let's take it to a vote. All in favor? Good. C1 is a bike and path.
C1 is to amend the operational policy and master plan agreement with the Front Street Shipyard. City Planner Wayne Marshall's here to talk about it.
Wayne Marshall, City Planner. I provided this information on each of your desks. I also emailed this out shortly before the council meeting. There have been some last-minute concerns raised by MDOT. One of those involved the current status of the operational policy that talked about where bicycles must be walked through the shipyard site. I've had an opportunity to talk with J.B. Turner at the shipyard. I've had an opportunity to talk with MDOT. I've suggested some alternative language, which I've put together in front of you. This policy basically says that both pedestrians and bicycles can be making use of the site, but it does say during the time that when the shipyard may actively be moving a boat using the travel lift, for example, that they could ask that someone walk their bike through that congested area. And what I would ask for is council's support of this. This was set up as an amendment process being possible through the operational policy, which you adopted about 4 months ago. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
That's it.
I read this over, and I'm not pleased with the language because it seems confusing to me. It says that with respect to bicycle access, the shipyard may ask bicycles to be walked but not ridden through sections of the shipyard property that are subject to a temporary closure. If the shipyard determines that temporary closure could result in a situation that may be considered unsafe for a person riding a bicycle. Closure to me implies or means that it's closed. I think there has to be another word other than closure, because to me, if there's a closure, then no one's going through and they're using the other, the alternate route.
If I could, this reflects the language in the existing agreement, and the closure references the idea is that when you go through the travel lift pad, the travel lift pad area would be closed and people need to loop around it.
Right.
And that's what it's referencing.
Well,
so it's not referencing the closure of the whole, it's the closure of a particular area.
Right, but, so what you're saying is if the travel lift pad is in use, and they're going to use the auxiliary
relief
path,
walkways.
the relief path in front of Building 5, for example, that they would have to walk their bicycles.
Or if what someone does is, which the council talked about, is that instead of using the relief path itself, someone is directed around the travel lift area. And we talked about working with shipyard employees to actually just direct people around using such things as temporary sawhorses to shut it off. And so that's the case where, to me, is if someone was walking, if they were going around the travel lift, is the way they could be asked to walk their bike through that site as opposed to riding it through the area.
Well, if you're going through it, then it's not closed.
That is the language that we used, though, was a temporary closure
Yeah,
in the original agreement, because what you're doing is shutting off a portion of the walkway.
Just, would the word detour work?
It's a new language, but I'm comfortable with that.
That sounds good.
So this means that a bicyclist could still ride their bike on the,
Relief walkway.
no, but I mean, at other times.
Yes.
They can ride their bike on the,
That is correct. And the only time where it's being talked about is the temporary closures.
I think that Nancy's concern is the language that says that the shipyard may ask bicycles to be walked but not ridden through sections of the shipyard property that are subject to a temporary closure. That doesn't really make much sense. If there's a piece of the property subject to a temporary closure, not only are you not going to ride your bicycle, you're not going to walk.
That was my point.
I think it would be changed. It would read more correctly if it says something like, bicycles to be walked but not ridden through sections of the shipyard property during a temporary closure of whatever it is. You know, if you want to be is it just the travel lift area, or? You see what I'm saying?
That's why I use the word sections, because the shipyard has the opportunity to close off more than one section of the harbor walk.
Where do you,
The shipyard.
maybe I missed it.
Shipyard has walked through but not ridden through sections of the shipyard property.
But you see, it's through sections that are subject to a temporary closure. That's the problem.
subject to part.
Right.
right. It's not
It's not the sections that are subject to the closure through which you can walk your bike. It's other sections when there is a temporary closure. I mean, we're being pretty picky here, but I think there is a problem with the language. I'd be willing to just let it go, but you're right.
I think during is, it implies a time, where the other is just subject to. It's subject to something at any point in time. It could be subject to it even if there wasn't anything in the travel list. So during would make me happier.
I'd be happy to make that change.
And I think that the detour, rather than the closure, makes a lot of sense as well.
I volunteer, if JB will videotape it, to do a demonstration with a ship in front of the walkway on a bike, so it can all be cleared up. During, before, after. Yearly reminder we talked about while JB's here, yearly reminder if we could get together with them to discuss how it went. Remember our little, we want to do that once a year, and I think we talked about September, so if this month or next month, according to JB and our schedules, if we could meet with them to see how the rules...
Well, we don't have the walkway yet.
Right, but we had set up to have a meeting because there were just, how did the season go, things like that, in terms of public interactions and things like that. You guys remember that? Okay.
Anybody who's ever had anything to do with the DOT would have reason to not be very impressed. I want to compliment them for catching something that I remember vaguely kind of went by our radar, but somehow I just didn't think it was realistic. But we had somehow included that you would have to walk your bike through the shipyard portion, and that was in there. And I guess they rightfully looked at that and said, that's not going to work. That's, it's kind of ridiculous. So I think that's what they
We picked it up, and what we were planning was that during one of these annual review sessions,
Right.
we would take a look at it and correct the language as necessary. It turns out the DOT is insisting on doing it right away.
Right away,
I
yeah.
think it's a
I
good
think that's a
thing
good
that it's
idea.
insisted.
Anyway, I think this is a good
Okay.
solution.
I got a motion?
Did we make a motion? I make a motion, we approve the new language and
As amended.
as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, JB.
Consideration of a request from the planning department for authorization to apply for the coastal communities grant to support the development of flexible shoreline zoning for Belfast properties.
Evening, councilors, city manager.
Hope I'm in the right spot. Display a map.
Purple mic?
Yes, good idea. This is a request based on a project which is ongoing in the Belfast Planning Board for grant funds through the Maine Coastal Competitive Program to assist the planning board in procuring professional services of a geologist and engineer to look at aspects of our coastline in Belfast. And the map which the planning board is working with now shows the subject of the new regulations from DEP that we're supposed to implement in Belfast. They have to do with unstable bluffs and moderately unstable bluffs on the coastline. So this map is available in the Planning and Development Department for closer inspection. But basically, the yellow areas are considered unstable bluffs. And in those areas, DEP will require the city to change how the setback from the water is measured. And that is this very short summary of the effect of the new regulations. The city has avoided adopting these new regulations for a couple of years now because homeowners came to the planning board when the zoning amendment was first proposed and raised serious questions about the quality of the data that DEP was using from a survey of the coastline. So if we are successful in this grant application, we will have a geologist and engineer inventory the actual conditions of the coastal bluffs in Belfast to help us get a more flexible set of regulations adopted and not use what the planning board considers a one-size-fits-all approach from the DEP. In short, the engineer that the planning board has consulted with on a preliminary basis has proposed a scope of work valued at $16,000, and the grant program requires a 25% match. So certainly available to take more detailed questions if there are any, but the nuts and bolts of my request is for the council to appropriate $4,000 in new matching funds to be made available in the event the planning board is successful in pursuing these funds. The application is due on September 17th. We're otherwise prepared to submit the application. The recommended motion is to authorize staff to submit the application and to make available $4,000 in matching funds. If there are any questions, I'd like to hear about it.
It's not really a question, it's just a clarification. The purpose of this project, as I understand it, and please tell me if I'm wrong, is so that property owners will have a more individualized, they'll be allowed a more individualized approach to dealing with their shorefront property as far as setbacks, et cetera. Is that correct?
That's exactly right. And many property owners have made improvements already, which the planning board wants to give them credit for, and may even be able to get them redesignated out from these yellow unstable areas into stable. And again, it's a very fine point to make about a small aspect of shoreline zoning, but the change would have the effect of measuring that setback from the top of the coastal bluff instead of where it's measured today, which is at the high annual tide. So on some properties, it's a small difference. On other properties, there's potentially significant development potential, which is tied up in this proposed zoning amendment, I should say required zoning amendment, which has been promulgated by DEP. So we're looking for a chance, with the advice of a geologist and engineer, to make a more flexible zoning amendment that preserves more development potential for owners of coastal property in Belfast.
Support the research. I don't know if anybody has ever seen it. There's been some really amazing collapses of shoreland, especially down in the Rockland area. I don't remember how many hundreds of feet just slid into the harbor there, but if your house was, took houses with it.
5 acres.
Yeah, 5 acres, that's significant. So this seems like pretty important to get that well researched.
And again, this information is available anytime in the Planning Development Department. These are soil types overlain onto the city's tax map, which should give more information of the type that Mike is describing.
Make a motion, we approve the request.
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Thank you.
Walter, is it possible to move up the chief so he can get out of here?
I've got the harbor master next.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, maybe right after the harbor master.
This would be a request from the harbor master to apply for a boating infrastructure grant to replace the fuel lines down at the town dock.
Yep, Kathy Pickering, harbor master. Back in May, I informed you of a problem we have with our fuel system down at the harbor with our leaking sump, which is a containment structure for fuel lines that were broken when the wharf was rebuilt. We have to get the sump either fixed or replace the line so we don't need the sump. We had gotten 2 estimates, which I hadn't gotten at the time I spoke to you in May, and unfortunately they're a lot higher than I had predicted. To replace the sump is about $16,000, and that's with no guarantee it won't leak again. And to replace the fuel lines, which is the option I would lean more toward, would be closer to, the estimate we got was $26,000, but that does not include excavation and paving and electrical work for the alarm. So what I would like to do is apply for some big grant monies that are available for probably the amount of about $35,000. It would be through the state. Big grants are the boating infrastructure grants. This project does fit into their criteria. I'm a little late in trying to apply for it because the applications have to be in a couple of weeks, and I did know about this grant. I just don't have time to do this kind of paperwork during the summer. So it is kind of a long shot to move it forward, and Thomas is going to help me, but I'm going to do the majority of the work because I know what's down there, and they ask for the justification and whatnot. So I just would like, the grant requires a 25% match minimum. It can be partly in-kind services, which I need to get those details straightened out a little bit more. If you do provide more of a match, your points for getting the award are increased. And we do have funds in the Inc. fund for the match, or for the 25%, of course, or more if we choose to do that. Either way, the project has to be done. DEP requires it.
I was just going to say, I definitely recommend replacing the lines.
Yeah.
Definitely not trying to repair the sump pump again, and we're going to be in this position over and over. And I would do the full cash match. I wouldn't worry about an in-kind match. This is a critical harbor resource. It's going to be needed for the long term. If we can get the grant, it'll help us. If we can't, we're going to have to pay it out of pocket anyway.
Yep.
Right. So the only reason we have the sump is because of the leak in the fuel line?
They're is no leak in the fuel line itself, and I want to make that very clear, because that just wouldn't be good. The lines were installed when the wharf was rebuilt, and when they were excavating around the lines, the excavator busted them. DEP requires when you have any break in the line that you have a containment area that the lines, in case they do leak, it can catch the fuel. The sump, unfortunately, is right next to the bulkhead. It's really unstable ground down there, and it's below the high tide elevation when we have very high tide, so it leaks both fresh and salt water, which is not allowed. It has to be a totally contained container.
So, once we've done this line, we're not going to have to, we're not going to need a sump.
Exactly,
Okay.
yeah.
When you kept saying big grants, I was like, is that like a adjective? And then I realized boating infrastructure grant.
Yeah, it's a federal grant.
BIG, okay. Anyway, I make a motion that we approve the application, and then I have a question, so that's in the form of a motion.
I'll second that.
Discussion.
Quick question. Isn't that something Thomas Kittredge could help with?
Yeah, Joe actually suggested I talk to Thomas, and he's going to as much as he can, and I will need his help for some of the forms and whatnot, but, you know, he's pretty busy right now himself. But a lot of the grant write-up is about what the project actually is, and how do you justify it, and how is it good for your facility. So a lot of that I'm really going to have to do, but he certainly will be able to do the formal grant procedure format. He'll be able to answer a lot of questions that I won't be able to very readily.
Marina?
Do you have any sense of how competitive these grants are?
I think the Tier 2 has 11 million. They can be fairly competitive. Smaller projects, I think, you have a pretty good chance of getting funding for. It may not be all of it, but...
Right. You know, it seems to me, since this is something that we're going to have to do anyway, we either have to pay for 100% of it, or we have to pay a match. It seems to me that we want to be more competitive. And I certainly would be willing to have a 40% match. I think that if that improves our chances, that it makes sense to do it.
Any more discussion? I have a motion and a second. I'll take it to a vote. All in favor?
Well,
You voting?
I don't think we've had the discussion about...
No, they just voted. I got 4-1 right now.
I didn't vote.
Well, I thought you had your hand up.
No, I didn't, because Marina was speaking. I didn't think it was appropriate to take the vote.
She was done speaking.
Well, I thought she began to speak in the middle of the vote, so I always defer to counselors and figure that it's right to have them continue discussion when they want to have more discussion.
We have a 3-2 vote as we speak right now. All in favor, and that's taking it as a vote. 3-2.
I wasn't quite sure of the, why were the two opposed? Was I
don't know.
I didn't vote.
thought she stopped talking and when I took it to a vote. Roger didn't think she stopped.
I didn't vote.
Oh.
I didn't vote
I
either.
voted opposed. I didn't vote.
I made a suggestion that we didn't discuss about how much are we going to allow in terms of a match.
I see it as a vote. You want to rescind the vote, make the motion to rescind the vote, but I see it as a vote.
Would you guys like to re-vote on it? I'll make a motion to rescind the vote and reconsider it.
Any discussion on that? All in favor? Okay, now, what do you got on your mind? Well, are you through or not? I mean,
Well, I just think that we should make it clear how much we're going to allow for a match. I think there should be a discussion about it.
I have a question. How much is in the ink fund?
As of late November, just over 200,000.
I make a motion that we allow the Economic Development Director and the Harbor Master to use their discretion if they feel that a larger match than 25% will increase the chances of obtaining the BIG grant.
Second.
discussion?
You're going to be given discretion to decide whether we want to apply more than 25% match with the harbor master.
I guess I'm just missing it. I'm not clear, how much is the grant, how much is the match, and where is the fund, are the funds going to come from if we get this grant?
I think when all the estimates come in for, because I would like to get the estimates also for the excavation and the paving, which we didn't get because we were kind of looking at Public Works to do that, but I think there should be a full package that we apply for. That will bring the total around $35,000, so it'll be about that amount that we're applying for. So we have to have a minimum of 25% match, and part of that can be in-kind services, but I need to check to see exactly what they allow for that.
So 25% would be around, whatever it is, eight or 9,000. And where would that money come from?
The Inc. fund, which presently...
Would always come from the Inc. fund.
Yeah, so it has over $200,000 in it right now.
Money?
Kathy, this is coming from the existing tank right near the restrooms to the, all the way across to the, like, the fuel dock. So
Right.
you're going directly under where the walkway is going to be.
Yeah, although there's already a chase built underneath
Okay,
there,
so
so we
when-
shouldn't have to excavate.
Yeah, because this would be the
Underneath.
time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Kathy,
Yes.
if you was to relocate these tanks at some other port spot to get bigger tanks in there, which you do need, bigger tanks, what would happen with these lines? We'd be going down this road again?
If you, it depends. If you put in larger tanks exactly where the current tanks are, which I'm not sure you're allowed to do that because of the setbacks. You might be able to use the existing lines, but DEP is really fussy about anything you do with the lines that may create another leaking juncture point. So I did ask a representative from one of the owners of Thompson's Oil to come down when we were talking about our capacity, and he suggested because the current tank we have is one tank, but it's baffled for both the gas and diesel, and the gasoline is 2,500 gallons and the diesel is 1,500 gallons, so the total tank capacity is 4,000. Thompson's Oil suggested that if we get into a problem where we're selling more gas or more diesel, then we can swap out, just switch them around. It costs about $1,000 to do that because you have to get them cleaned and whatnot, but that's an option. They also suggested that, which Joe suggested, to check into if they can just deliver more often. And they're very good, they're great to work with. We call them first thing Monday morning, and then the middle of the week, and then Friday morning, and tell them what we need, and they'll bring a truck down and top it off. They don't have any problem with doing that. If we get into a situation where we need fuel every day, then that might be a problem, but it's really hard to predict that's going to happen, and to put in new tanks and everything is going to be a huge amount of money. So really, there's a lot to balance out, whether you want to try to maintain the system we have for another 10 years or whatever, and because the rest of it is in good shape. Pretty much everything is new with it. You can spend the money now and get those lines done, and you should be good to go for, the lines now are 15 years old almost. So probably another 15 or 20 years, unless, again, we really get into a problem with the capacity. But and you're talking big money when you want to, if you want to go that route. And right now,
everything is changing daily down there. These bigger boats and
yeah, it does.
More fuel.
The real big boats can fuel at the shipyard off the trucks, which they prefer to do because it's easier. They have bigger, more capacity, so it doesn't take as long to fuel. And the price is better. We just can't compete with the prices that they can give them. Somebody, a fuel company can give them.
Okay. So, you want to take it to a vote now, fellas, or what? You all set? Okay, we'll take it.
The motion is to give the harbor master and the economic development director the discretion to add to the match if they feel it will enhance our chances to secure grant award.
Take it to vote. All in favor?
Thank you. Mike, did you now want to move?
Well, I was just asking the mayor if we could do that.
Well, I don't know. Does that dad do anything for this council? I'm serious.
That's right, yeah. Mr. Mayor, do you think we could bring up the chief?
Yeah.
Mike McFadden, Chief of Police here in Belfast. City Manager Joe Slocum asked me to look into video surveillance systems. And I thought I knew quite a bit about them before I started looking into them, but I realized that I really didn't. There's a lot to learn. For instance, I just confirmed with Ned Leitner my suspicion that this system in here is what's called an analog system. There's other systems that I'm going to suggest strongly we explore seriously for the Harbor Walk. They're called IP megapixel cameras. Essentially, those cameras are the new age. They're where technology has brought us. For a small area like this, inside, I would recommend the analog cameras. They give you essentially what you want. The IP megapixel cameras, however, are smart cameras. You can tell them what you want, and they will give it to you, and they will tell you, they will communicate with you. There's a lot of features that these IP megapixel cameras can offer, some of which I don't even want to get into in a public meeting. I discussed briefly with Mayor Ash some of the things that they can do. I don't know that we want to tip our hand to that extent. Not that I want to keep great secret, but I also want to have a few cards in my pocket. I'm not prepared entirely to speak with you about the nuts and bolts of the system as far as what that system's going to look like. I've taken, it's a big project. I was given the Harbor Walk, the downtown, which is Main Street area, and High Street area, and City Hall as well. I was given the City Park in terms of the snack shack and the pool area, and also the transfer station. So what I figured is I took 3 companies, and I told them their job was to educate me in the ways of video surveillance. I told them that when the City Council decided to go ahead with this system, that there would be a competitive bid process, and for their time and effort, they would probably have an advantage, but they would not be a shoo-in for the the process. I shared with them literature about the Harbor Walk. I look at the Harbor Walk as sort of the flagship system. It's going to be the biggest system. It's almost a mile. It's just many of the companies that I've spoken with suggest that this will be the biggest system that they've ever designed. Each system operates with a DVR, digital video recorder. And that's regardless of whether it's an analog system or IP megapixel system. For the Harbor Walk, unless things go our way, we're looking at 3 separate digital video recorders. Not because the amount of cameras that this system is going to require dictates that. It's because the system is going to have to be chopped up because of distances. There's a chance, if the Front Street Shipyard allows us to work on their fiber system, that we'll be able to reduce that to 2 systems. Also, the Harbor Master has expressed an interest in getting some video surveillance equipment down in her neck of the woods down there in the harbor, the slips and where the dinghies are and things of that nature, which is entirely possible with this system. The system would require that a Cat5 cable be run from the DVR to the cameras. So the way I understand it is the Harbor Walk has already designed and engineered conduit to each of the light poles, and as a conduit specifically for video surveillance. So we can utilize that conduit for the Cat5 cable. The Cat5 cable will do 2 things for us, which is an advantage with the IP megapixel cameras. It'll supply power to the camera, and it'll deliver information back and forth from the DVR to the camera, and vice versa. I think the IP megapixel camera is the way to go. There's a wide fluctuation in prices with IP megapixel cameras, and that fluctuation coincides with the megapixels. The 1.3 megapixel camera is relatively cheap, perhaps $300 to $400. I don't want you to get caught up on that $300 to $400 mark, because that camera will give you the blurry, fuzzy images that you can almost tell it's a human being at 100 feet. We don't need that. I don't think we need that. The cameras that are going to give us the type of images that we can really use in the event that something unfortunate happens in this area are more like $500 to $700 cameras. I have a rough idea. I've been given a rough idea of what this system is going to cost. I don't think sticker shock is the appropriate word, because you have to have something to compare it with. I think maybe something more like sticker cardiac arrest might be a more appropriate term. But for this system, as it stands now, without the use of the Front Street Shipyard's fiber system, we're looking at something no less than $70,000. And that's the complete system. Now, Councilor Hurley had mentioned something with regard to wanting a cheap system, and let's not spend a whole lot of money on networking this system because it's just not necessary. The networking in these systems is already there. I mean, that's the least technical aspect of a system of today. Now, I'm not talking about a system that you can go up to Sam's Club and purchase for $400. that'll give you reasonable results in a room like this. I'm talking about a system that's going to last for the next 10 years out in the harsh conditions beside the harbor. Sam's Club doesn't sell a system like that. But, yeah. These systems, it's important, I think, for us to consider the fact that we want to monitor these systems remotely, not because I think I'm going to have time during the day to stare at these monitors for 8 hours, but because at a glance I can look and determine whether or not the system's working properly, instead of a system that's what I would coin the phrase a dumb system that I can't access remotely. Now I have to either go or have an officer go and check to make sure that all the cameras in the system are functioning properly, because I can guarantee you if one of them goes down, that's the exact camera we're going to need in the event that something unfortunate happens.
Roger?
You mentioned several areas that you were asked to look at a system for. Your sticker shock cardiac arrest system, does that cover all those areas, one of those areas?
That covers the harbor walk.
Now,
and that covers, there's going to be 3 separate systems. So I think we can...
How many cameras, just roughly, on the harbor walk in that system?
About 40. Okay. But that system is capable of, if we want to, and this is another issue why I think we should go with the IP cameras or be looking in that direction, is we can build on that system. And there's so many things that the system can do for you. I think that perhaps in the transfer station we can get away with an analog system. And when you're talking about an analog system, the only thing that differs between that and a megapixel system is the camera itself. The DVR is relatively the same, and as a matter of fact, the DVR system for an analog system will be more expensive than a megapixel system.
Joe?
I just wanted to point out, when you discussed the idea of monitoring to check to see if it's working and functioning right, that's not what I thought is the old traditional, all these screens on a wall, but that's monitoring that literally could be done from a computer screen just about anywhere.
Anywhere on the planet that you have internet access to. And it's an icon on your desktop. I would suggest that we make the system, this system's basic features available to the public. I don't know why we wouldn't.
So a police officer in East Belfast who has a computer in the front seat of their car and has access to the internet to it could quickly look and check surveillance on the harbor walk on the other side of Belfast.
Correct.
And it's a big investment, but if we were to hire a police officer, pay him a year's worth of benefits, we'd spend more than $70,000.
Without tipping my hand too much, not only will a police officer be able to see the downtown waterfront while he's on a traffic stop out on the town line on Route 3, but this system can be designed to notify him of certain activities occurring on the waterfront, which would take the place of 3 or 4 officers year-round, 24 hours a day.
Dwayne, go ahead, Joe.
I'd just like to note is that $22,000 of the harbor walk is our cost estimate to put in basically the conduit for this project. So when you do think of cost, about $22,000, in addition to what's being talked about here, was one of the bid alternates in on the harbor walk project. So,
in addition to the 70?
Yes.
But just for the conduit.
Just for the conduit.
So a case could be made, so I hope I don't speak out of line, that the wiring costs 22, stands to reason that...
The conduit for the wiring costs
Right,
22.
Right. So the conduit...
With no wire in it.
Right.
I understand why we would want surveillance through the shipyard, part of the harbor walk, but is the other end towards the boathouse, is that mostly for safety reasons? Or why would we have surveillance there?
There's portions of the harbor walk where we have less of concern. And then there's portions of the harbor walk that we have a larger concern. Those are strategies that I think may be better discussed in executive session or whatever. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to say that, but I would rather not get into too much of the design.
But it's for safety, people's safety more than for the actual things. It's for people, right, through there. You know, in terms of downtown, we've only had a couple of serious incidents that I'm aware of in many, many years. Does it really make sense to have, you know, a surveillance system? Is that necessary? I mean,
I hope that our trend continues to go the way it is, but I can tell you this summer has been extremely busy for the officers in town. And they've been fairly minor. A couple of broken windows, some upset flower pots. But I don't know what 10 seconds from now is going to bring us. I think that as we get more people in here and we're inviting more people to come and utilize these great things that we're doing in the city, we should be prepared to do everything we can to protect their interests when they come here to enjoy those things.
I just have a little concern about overreaction to something that was really a very rare occurrence. The other thing that I wanted to say is the playground is another area where I heard you mention the shack house and the pool, but the playground is also really important.
Mike?
I had a question for Kathy, but Kathy, you're going to be here for a while? You're just hearing on that? Okay. Before you leave, I'll catch you outside then. But I just wanted to go back. You know, originally, as I said to the chief, my thinking had been, and I know we've wanted some video capability down on the Harbor Walk, but I do think perhaps we ought to have a bigger discussion about, you know, exactly what do we want. Because my thinking originally had been not that we could possibly, you know, just have video everywhere so that you could, no matter where something happened, you would nail it with a video camera, but that if you had it, you know, small systems on city buildings that exist like City Hall or the Harbor Masters building or the boathouse or the library or something like that. You know, I'm remembering reporter Dave Peace, who died in his car right across from, parked in front of the video place, and, you know, just pulled up in his car. I don't even think he put it in park. And, you know, they had him on video, and you could just see, well, that's when he died, right then. You know, it's... but when we start talking about 40 cameras just in the Harbor Walk, and then we start thinking of these other sites that we're thinking about just for, you know, I was more thinking in terms of, you know, that if somebody happened to be walking by, well, then you could look at them. But I understand the chief's learning a lot more than perhaps my ideas were a little too hopeful and simple, but but before we come back with a $350,000 proposal to, put in 500 cameras all over town, maybe we ought to know exactly more what are the parameters that we actually want to try and achieve. And I don't know if we want to do that tonight. Probably not.
I mean, I would advocate a workshop or some type of workshop with the ability to go into executive session if needed. Listen, I think it's important, and I think you're spot on, and we need to know the parameters of high end and low end and make a group decision with your input. I go back to the fire chief when we were discussing fireworks in town, and he did not support, you remember, he was like, from a fire safety measure, he's like, no, I don't support it because of fires. So I think when we look at cost, we also have to look at maybe not what's happened, but with a harbor walk, which is going to change the downtown and the people that will be traveling on the harbor walk and situations that might occur, I think it's very important that we have the right materials in place to support our police officers. So I think it's great information. I'm not surprised. Safety costs a lot of money. Good safety. So you've given us good parameters, and I think we need a workshop.
While you're continuing these discussions, are you coming up also with, are they coming up with some ideas like, there's different kinds of cameras. I was thinking of getting one, just buying one and then sticking a couple out my window, and I immediately ran into that. Well, if you think you're going to look across the street at night, you're not,
The cameras that we're pricing out, these guys are professional. They started coming up with stuff that I didn't even know, like the low lux rating on these cameras that gives them the ability to see after dark and in low light, and how the camera reacts to set of headlights coming through, and if it washes out, turns dark. There's all kinds of different stuff that we have to take into consideration here.
Our purpose tonight was just to give the council some updated information, not to take any action, to realize that if you're going to have a surveillance system, you got to have one that works, and it looks like it's going to cost more than we initially thought. There's some bells and whistles to it, and as the chief looks at it again, we will have perhaps some more discussion in a work session or something, so we can chart a course of how you want to proceed. Surveillance cameras have been something the council's been talking about for several years, and at the end of the day, somebody in law enforcement should be the one who can benefit from those cameras as much as anyone.
I think it's great you've done that research. In order for us to make this decision, we'll need to know how much would be the cost of covering the other areas, which are equally important.
Right.
So in the end, my guess is that it's going to turn not on the cost. It'll depend somewhat on the cost. But I don't see the cost as the major concern. I think we're really going to have to grapple with whether the downside to sort of loss of privacy, if you will, is worth it. And I'm not sure where I come out on it. I really would like to be able to deter the kinds of vandalism that have occurred infrequently, but they have occurred, and I think they'll continue. But at the same time, I don't know, the idea of someone being able to look at every location on the Harbor Walk in high definition, anytime, I don't know.
Well, it is a public place.
Well, it is, I agree. Yes, it is a public place.
I forgot what I was just going to say.
Grant money out here for this type of thing?
Yes, thank you. I believe there may be. I'm in the exploration stage. Mr. Kittredge is a busy man, and he's agreed to help me out with that. I've contacted Sergeant Kearns from Bar Harbor Police Department, who's been assisting in writing several grants for what I've been told is huge money. Some of them, you know, $1 million or more from what I've heard, not confirmed, for their video surveillance systems over there. He was helped by a lieutenant with the Coast Guard, who happens to have her office directly above mine here in Belfast now.
Oh.
So I think I might have some good help from her in exploring some grant opportunities for this as well.
Turn down the radio. Be a good neighbor.
Exactly.
Anything about opportunities for private merchants to have their insurance reduced if there's some kind of surveillance system?
I don't know about any of those programs. I would think that their insurance would go up if they didn't have them. I don't know.
I've explored that myself lately.
Is there a savings?
It has to be a certain type of stuff documented by the insurance companies of equipment, and through that, they recommended I not go that way.
Right.
For the savings.
I know we have one retail store here in Belfast that has a series of analog cameras. It's a small, chopped-up store. The analog cameras serve the purpose spot on, and they have made their system available to us when we need it. It's also integrated into their cash register system. To say that that's been a huge help to our department in solving just an infinite number of cases is an understatement.
Yeah, it's, you know, like it or not, whether it's a privacy issue or not, this video stuff has solved just unbelievable amounts of crime, not just here. A building burned up in Holton, right across from a building that I own, and you know, they just went and looked at the video cameras at the various places, and then here's this, you know, guy who was well known, and he's in the Walmart, and he's got camping gasoline and a bottle of kerosene, and he's pricing the difference, which one is cheaper, apparently. Then he bought one, and they found the empty one there. It's, you know, the stuff really pays off. And, you know, I mentioned this in passing, and I think it would be a great thing is, you know, for instance, Belfast Army Navy has 2 cameras that are out on, as you walk by, one's looking at you if you're walking down the street, and one's looking at you if you're walking up the street. You know, it's just something like that can be absolutely, you know, look at this, at 10:02, X happened, and at 10:03, there's so-and-so just walking by, you know, heading downhill. You know, if we ever came up with even some kind of small city grant program for businesses to install these have that kind of access, I think that'd be a great idea, or some kind of micro.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, consideration of the new mill rates for the city of Belfast set at 19.8.
Yes, this is where the assessor believes we should be. It's consistent with where I thought we were going to be as we went through the city budget and looked at the implications of the county budget as well as the school budget. We want to send the tax bills out, and this leaves us an overlay of about $70,000. In normal years, we grant about $60,000 a year in abatements to minor mistakes in the valuation. Last couple of years, we've been lucky. It's been about $36,000 a year for the last couple of years. But the primary reason for the overlay is to help with abatements as they become known and understood during the course of the year. I need a motion to approve the mill rate so we can get the tax bills out.
I just want to understand your math. You're saying add 19.8, that would give us, it means we would collect $70,000 more, that's the overlay.
That's correct.
Than we need for our budget, the schools and the county. Now, $70,000, isn't that approximately a tenth of a mil?
Yes.
So I don't understand, therefore, the 19.75, and I particularly have difficulty with the 0.01% in your manager's letter. Wouldn't we be able to cover the budgets of the city, the county, and the schools with 19.7?
Yes.
Okay. Because you.
Yes.
Shouldn't the .01 be a .1?
0.5%.
Well, whatever it is. That's not important. The important thing is you've confirmed, so that we could set it at 19.7.
Right.
And have zero overlay.
And when we give abatements, we will have to come and take them out of surplus, because we have no fund to pay abatements.
Right, but of course, it's all an estimate, so many lines of the budget are. I mean, we don't know for sure what a dozen lines in the revenue budget are really going to be, and we equally don't know what the expenses are going to be in a dozen lines in the expense side of the budget. So it has been frequently the case that the council has not voted to include an overlay. In fact, I can't remember when we've done it. Have we in the past 5 years?
Yes, you have. Yes, you have.
You're allowed to take
There
up
have
to 5%.
been a couple of years when you didn't, but there were a couple of years when you did. The assessor recommends $100,000. The difference...
I can't remember any year in which we did.
The difference, with all due respect to everyone, the difference between 19.7 and 19.8 is really, really insignificant. And these are very tight budgets. And if anybody thinks we're going back to 19.1 or 18.5 in the near term, we'll have to make serious cuts to do that at the county level, at the school level, and at the city level. We have not had a mill rate increase for 3 years. I think 19.8 is where you should be.
I support 19.7. I don't think it's necessary to tax more than what's forecast in the budgets. I don't understand the need for overlay.
Except that we haven't done the union negotiations yet.
Absolutely, but it isn't much money, it's just the principle of it. I don't really understand why we should ask. Actually, I believe the reason for overlay is actually, usually it's used in order to build up surplus.
You have no overlay, it'll do just the opposite. It will lower your fund balance. There's no question at all, there are going to be some mistakes in this tax commitment. And there's no question that taxpayers are going to come forward and get those mistakes corrected.
That's always been true. That was true in years when we didn't do an overlay.
When we don't collect it, if we have zero overlay, you are taking that money right out of your fund balance. If that's what you want to continue to do, that's fine. It's not what I recommend.
Do you have any information about what happened with the last fiscal year, whether
$38,000 last year in abatements, but normally it's closer to $66,000 a year. That's what the assessor says.
No, but I mean, when everything was tallied up for last year, was there any surplus left over, or was there a deficit? I mean, we should have those numbers by now, I would think.
They were in the audit.
I think last year you might have had a zero overlay. And so you would have taken money out of surplus to pay the abatements. You have more tax challenges now than you had a year ago, and twice as many as you had 2 years ago. And you're going to keep having them because it's a tough economy.
That's really just one small factor that influences what our surplus is. It's really tiny compared to our surplus will go up and down depending on dozens of things. The abatements are one thing. If the revenues from ambulances go down unexpectedly, well, our surplus will be hit.
That's
if
correct.
they go up our surplus will get larger.
We don't have any realistic expectation they're going to go up after the budget we've just concluded for the city.
I'm sorry, but the doom and gloom that you're painting, Joe, just isn't fair. The budget doesn't, we've put together a sensible, conservative budget. We didn't put in unrealistically high numbers for ambulance revenues. We put in what were reasonable numbers. So it could be either way. I just don't think we need the overlay, but look, it's a very small matter.
Whatever your pleasure is.
I don't feel we should tax more than what we need to pay for the budgets of the city, the county. And
I just wanted to ask a question to either, because I understand what Roger's point is. I feel I do. Did we ever budget for abatements in the past? So we've never budgeted?
No. That's what the overlay is principally for. So it's to handle mistakes. So when Councilman Lee says we don't have to raise this money because we don't need it, that's not necessarily true. It is documented that every single year we do make some mistakes in evaluation, which means we do not raise what we thought we were going to raise, and we use the overlay to fill in that gap.
Okay, but as I thought I was hearing you say, the overlay was due to the abatements that potentially we might need to make in the coming year that have averaged around $66,000 a year, last year 37 or 38. So my question again was, we've never budgeted for potential abatement. So, okay.
What is the difference between a mill rate of 0.198 and 0.197 on $100,000?
Well, it would be,
it's 19.8 is $19.8 per thousand.
Right.
So it's
$1,980 per year in taxes or $1,970 per year in taxes?
We're talking about $10.
So $10
for 100,000.
That's correct.
It's not very much.
No. It's a question of whether or not we want people to pay it $10 or whether if we run into problems, as we will at least to some extent, we take it out of surplus.
Well,
Our city manager has given us advice in the past about how to deal with our mill rates and our surplus, and in retrospect, had we followed his advice in the past, we would not have had this sticker shock with the taxes, and I'm inclined to follow his advice. He has been right on in the past on things that I have really disagreed on, and I trust his judgment.
Roger?
Well, Joe has suggested in the past that we include an overlay, and we haven't always, but you go too far, Marina. You would lead some viewers to think that had we followed Joe's advice, we wouldn't have seen anywhere near the 10% increase, and that's simply not true. I think some people would have concluded that had they listened to what you just said. So if we'd followed Joe's advice, are you suggesting we wouldn't be seeing a large tax increase this year?
No, I'm saying what you would have seen was a small increase over a period of 3 years. And it still would have been a significant increase this year. There's no doubt about that. But had we not taken money from surplus in previous years to cover the gap in revenues, it might have actually been a little easier on people to budget and not quite as much of a shock.
Right.
I don't know that there's much difference between 19.8 and 19.73 or whatever it is.
There isn't much difference.
Yeah, so
I don't feel
I make a motion that we approve 19.8, and the only upside on that is, well, it goes to the would have a surplus, which we'll end up using to lower our taxes in the next year, but possibly. So anyway, I make that in the form of a motion. Also with the mind that, I don't know where I wrote it down somewhere, but I wrote down somewhere at 9:30, somebody wanted to get out of here, but I don't think that's happening right now.
I need a second?
Second.
Okay. I have a motion, I have a second. Any more discussion?
Well, I think it's a point of reference that what Michael just said, I hope we don't do anymore, which I think has led to this moment in time. I don't think we should necessarily, I led with Joe's advice this year that we shouldn't take from surplus, and I liked that. So I would prefer, whatever we overlay or underlay, that we don't use surplus next year to offset taxes. I would prefer, and I think Roger's point is the period at the end of this sentence of a very lean budget, to Joe's point, and very tight times. We've done a lot of work. But I think, realistically, I would prefer knowing where the bottom line is. So if the bottom line is $70,000 less, and then every decision that we make comes out of surplus, every decision, I'd prefer to know that. So I think there's merit in Roger's point, plus the principal aspect of it. It's true, 0.1 on a 10% isn't much, and the city had little to do, relatively speaking, with the budget increase in general. But I think $10 is $10. So why would we not try to spare people even $10? I think that's the question you're asking. And I agree with that.
So what would you prefer to do? You just prefer to just strike the 70,000? Is that...
Let's make it 1970.
Huh?
I said what I'd prefer to do. I don't feel that strongly about it. It is very little money, but it's just, I think it's just the principle of it, that's all.
Did you want to strike the 70,000, basically? Is that it? Just strike the overlay?
Well, we're setting a rate. It's either 19.8 or 19.7. Yeah. Joe is recommending 19.8 in order that there be about $70,000 of overlay to cover his concern. And it will mean that it's much more likely that the surplus will stay even at its $3 million figure or so than...
Down on 2.5, isn't it, Joe?
Yes.
What our surplus is not anything anybody in this room actually knows right now, for sure. And it's one of the shortcomings of our finances in the city, is we don't really know what it is. It's only known by a guy who does our audits, and we only barely understand how he does it.
Well, I got one thing to say. I can remember when we had $60,000 in surplus within the city.
Well, I guess then we knew.
And yes, we did. And you can have an overlay up to 5% by law, which we're nowhere near that.
Right. We're nowhere near that.
And councils passed before, most of this council's tenure, we carried an overlay about every year, around 2% or so. And just to keep that surplus, I guess the auditors recommend a little over, putting in $4 million for a surplus, and we're way under what they recommend at this time. If you figure it out into the months, what it takes to carry the city for a month, we should have enough for 3 or 4 months in surplus, or we're going to be to the bank borrowing money and paying interest to run the city. And I don't think that's the way I want to go. And it is a little amount. I really don't think it's enough, but, for an overlay, because things do come up. That's how this council has purchased different things, is through our surplus. such as the railroad corridor, that came through surplus. Down at the park down here, when we bought the Matthew Brothers property, that came out of surplus. We've used the surplus for a lot of things. And we would not be in the situation that we are today in the city if we didn't have that surplus to fall back on. And this is one way that it's created, is it goes from overlay. I mean, that's just one aspect.
It's
And I hear what you're saying, Roger.
Legitimate point of view. Look, I think we're spending way too much time.
I do too.
That's the point here.
It is.
Just take the vote.
I think we got the recommendation from the manager, and we got a motion on the floor.
And I think you've got the votes to pass the motion, so let's go.
I think I'd go with him, but I'll take it to a vote if everybody's through discussion. All in favor? 2, 3, opposed? 3-2.
You got it.
So, passes. Here we go, budget again. A request from the Waldo County Budget Committee for the council to vote on a budget member from the town of Lincolnville.
No, declined.
What's your flavor here, folks?
Who's the person recommended? I may have missed it.
The only candidate running is David Barrows of Lincolnville.
Make a motion, we support him.
Second?
We have to vote on this, right? We
Yeah.
tried not to last time, and we got...
More process.
Right, okay. So I second.
Any discussion?
Yes. I think we ought to enthusiastically support him.
All in favor?
I don't think I want to vote for enthusiasm.
We did. Request for council to approve the warrant for the next election.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Update on possible tax increment financing opportunities for the future.
I think you're trying to push your hand around. Can I run a map for you?
Mr. Mayor, before Thomas starts, I'd just like to ask, is there a compelling reason why this is being brought to us tonight, particularly? I mean, I read through this, it's a complex thing. It seems to me something that we ought to discuss in a workshop where we could actually spend more time talking about it. I just question whether or not this is the appropriate venue.
Joe?
I assume responsibility for this. I thought this was one of those issues that we would talk about and kind of let you walk away thinking about it for a while, because it's not something that I think you can easily wrap your hands around and make a quick decision.
I have the utmost faith in the city councilors. They will be able to wrap their heads around what we're going to propose.
Okay, so we're not expected to have any action?
Not going to take any action
This is like an
tonight.
introduction?
It's an introductory discussion, that's all this is.
Okay. And City Planner Wayne Marshall, I'm sure will have some things to add as well. Just to recap, tax increment financing. It's a tool municipalities have to finance economic development projects. The way it works, you designate a district for a certain period of years. You take a snapshot of the assessed value at that moment in time. As improvements are made to properties in that district, the assessed value increases. The incremental new property taxes are put into a designated fund to use on qualified projects. That's essentially how it works. City of Belfast has 2 existing tax increment financing districts. One of them I don't have the map for is known as the Northport Avenue Development and Tax Increment Financing District. It's a 20-year TIF from 2006 to 2025. It would basically it counts 100% of the incremental value of real property. Funds generated by this district are used to retire a $350,000 general obligation bond that we used to pay for sewer line installation along Northport Avenue, Perkins Road, and Woodrow Lane, which was particularly to help Matthews Brothers expand back in 2006. The other one right here is in red is our current downtown waterfront municipal tax increment financing district. which extends from fiscal year 2007 to 2031, a 25-year TIF, which counts 100% of the incremental value of real property only. Funds generated by this year are used for various public infrastructure improvements. The development plan that's filed with the state, the Belfast Renaissance Plan, was the basis for determining which project should be in the development plan. So we have these two TIF districts that we use. We'd like to have you think about some proposed amendments to both of these districts. Let's see, which one should I start with? Let's talk about the downtown waterfront TIF district first. The first amendment we'd suggest making is, as I mentioned before, we only include real property right now. We don't include personal property in the value captured. We realize that there is new personal property related to Front Street Shipyard that we're not capturing any of that value by the way the TIF is set up. Currently, we estimate about $9,000 to $16,000 per year additionally would be generated if we included personal property for the downtown TIF, which we could use towards other identified projects.
Walter? Can I just ask a question that I think needs to be asked? I don't understand how personal property taxation works today in Maine. I had an impression, maybe it's just wrong, that something changed in state law a few years back that in effect ended taxation of personal
There are
property.
reimbursement programs for personal property. That does not, we're still able to, my understanding is, and it's too bad we don't have the city assessor here to explain it probably in more detail than I could, we still have an opportunity, the state reimburses that value, but we can still get funds for our TIF district if we include personal property in our TIF district.
So,
is that correct, Wayne? I probably didn't say it very eloquently, but...
Can I just say, if you look at the assessor's tax rate calculation form, you'll see that he's got local real estate tax valuation at $667 million in the city, but personal property's got valued at $24 million. So we definitely continue to tax for personal property, but there are a variety of reimbursement programs out there, and there are some exemptions.
just so we understand this, I think it comes up repeatedly. Maybe you can just come back at another meeting, but that 24 million, that's significant. We're receiving, every one of those $1,000 in there is going to give us $19.8. And but are the people who pay the $19.8 getting it back from the state, or are they getting it back from us?
Percentages back from the state.
Interesting. So we get the full amount, and the state gives back some of it from the state coffers?
Yeah.
Wow. Why?
We had that discussion here a few years
I'll bring
ago.
the assessor in to explain it. It is complicated. There's a Betty program, there's a Better program, there's 2 or 3 different types of property equipment. But the point is, we do value personal property, and this is what Thomas is talking about.
And personal property
is not currently included in either of our 2 TIF districts. We do not count that.
But it does contribute to our valuation.
Yes, it does.
Which,
And if you recall, one of the chief advantages for the municipality of doing a TIF district is that you're not penalized in terms of the state's formula for education, and when there was municipal revenue sharing, we don't lose that part of it. We had a shelter from doing that. So that's one suggestion, is that we amend the district to include personal property in addition to real property, which will generate additional revenue for projects in the downtown TIF district. Second would be to revise the development plan, the list of projects that could potentially use TIF money. It doesn't obligate us to do so. As I mentioned before, back in 2007, we used the Belfast Renaissance Plan as the basis for the list of projects. Since that time, projects have been completed. As well, we're doing the Downtown Waterfront Master Plan, which has generated a list of additional suggestions of projects in the downtown, and that development plan should be amended to reflect that. And third, expanding the boundaries of the Downtown Waterfront TIF District to include additional properties such as NTWH, Waterfall Arts, and several others, making the boundaries more synonymous with those of our town Belfast, the downtown district. On this map that Wayne put together, the yellow areas are ones that would be added to the existing downtown TIF district.
Tom? It looks to me like 4 of these yellow, including the police station and crossing, aren't they all inside the TIF district anyway?
No.
Well then, is...
Maybe, sorry, the red boundary underneath would be the new boundary, and the yellow would be the additional to the existing. Is that correct, Wayne? The way it's drawn?
What I did is I used the our town Belfast boundaries, and then I took out the areas shown in yellow are those not currently within the bounds of the TIF district. It was adopted in 2006. That's all it does. It's just to give you a comparison between the two.
Question?
Nancy?
Okay. Can we go back to the money for a minute?
Of course.
Okay, we had, what, $24 million citywide in personal property?
Yes, citywide, yeah, okay.
Okay.
That's what
So we don't know how much is in the TIF?
No, all I know is I think in conversations between the city planner and the city assessor, that if we included personal property for the downtown TIF, that would generate somewhere along the lines of $9,000 to $16,000 per year in additional funds for the TIF district.
Okay.
That estimate was provided by a State Department of Revenue official.
Okay.
Okay. So if we had that, it was in the TIF, it would shield it from being included in the city's formula that the state uses,
Yes.
school reimbursement. So we'd get more money from the state because that would be sheltered.
Yep.
However, that money would also be put in the TIF and would not be used for general city revenues.
Correct.
Correct? I would like to see some sort of spreadsheet breakdown how that would look, if that's possible. Because we don't really know what the benefits are, the cost benefits. So if we could have that kind of information, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Marina?
I think it's very important for us at this time to especially do an expansion that includes NTWH. We may in the future have an opportunity to purchase that property or do something with it, and if it's included in the TIF, then we can use TIF money for the purchase, and we would also need to amend the TIF guidelines to include a performing arts space as one of the possible usages of the TIF money. But I think that at this time that makes a lot of sense.
Nancy?
Can you give me a rationale for including something like the Waterfall Arts, which is a nonprofit, which I assume is not paying taxes as it is?
Still, the value would be included, even though they do not pay property taxes.
I think they
let me defer to
The
Wayne.
main reason for including it are public improvements, which is what the purpose of this TIF district are used for. Just recently, this council made a decision to put in an ice skating rink at Waterfall Arts. Well, you just voted to put in a shed at Waterfall Arts. You are now considering such things as putting in video surveillance cameras, which may be something that can be paid for through tax increment financing dollars in the long run. But there are things that when you tie the web of the downtown area together, those are things that may come into play.
So it doesn't matter about whether or not they're actually paying property
It isn't
tax.
so much that where they're pulling dollars into the tax increment financing district, there's a corollary between you spend the dollars in the area within the bounds of the district. So you may be using the dollars that come in from Front Street Shipyard or that come in from an expansion of the business downtown that is expended within another area of the TIF. And so it's where do you think it's important to be able to tie together expenditures to benefit those public improvements that you think work well for the downtown? And what all I've attempted to do, I'm not suggesting, I just want to, so you to see the boundaries of what the Our Town Belfast area are and how this correlates with what the current TIF district boundaries are. Maybe all these are appropriate, maybe some of them aren't, and it's just initial information to give you an idea about how the two match up.
I think I was just confused as far as valuation versus actual taxes paid. So, okay.
So those are the three potential changes we're recommending for the downtown waterfront TIF district. For the Northport TIF district, I don't have a map of that. I apologize. Again, we'd be looking to include personal property in addition to real property. Now with the addition of coastal farms and foods, there's additional, both real and personal property increase in value in that district, which would generate new revenue in that TIF district. The second change, I should mention, there are a couple different types of TIFs. A downtown TIF is a special designation, and one thing the state allows you to do is if you capture 100% of the value in your downtown TIF, which is what we do right now, 100% of real property. If you have another TIF district, you are able to divert funds from a secondary TIF district to your downtown TIF. As you recall, that TIF district, the second one, Northport Avenue, was set up to finance a sewer line installation. We expect, and we don't have hard amounts because the city assessor has not looked at what Coastal Farms has put in there and will not be doing that until next spring. We envision that revenue will exceed the bond payments for that sewer line installation. So you have funds building up with really no clearly identified other improvements to be made in that particular district. And when you look at all the different things that we may be wanting to do in the downtown, it may be wise to shift those funds into the downtown to take care of those projects. And that's something the state allows you to do with an amendment.
Question. If Coastal Farms has already put freezer equipment in that building, and all of a sudden we say, oh, well, we're going to include personal property, it seems like, can we capture the incremental value of the new equipment after the fact?
Yes, you're given a one-year look-back period.
You are.
And that was done, those improvements were done after the April 15th of this year. So that's not, as provided we do it in the next cycle, we have that ability to do that.
April 1st is tax
April 1st,
day.
I'm sorry, April 1st.
April 15th is when you pay your income.
Is that freezer installation qualify as personal property? I don't think so.
We've had that, well, it's either real or personal. It's got to be one or the
it's
other.
real is what I think.
I think we've had some conversations, and including personal property may be a way to make sure that that is included. That's really city assessor's, not prerogative, but his decision to.
My conversation with Bob is that he said he would likely consider the freezer to be real, but there's also production equipment that is within the plant that could be considered personal property.
But if it's personal property, if it's valued as personal property, then they have an opportunity to get their taxes rebated. But if we call it real property, then they won't, correct?
I'm not going to try and explain the law. What Bob's basic was on the freezer is it's fixed and firm.
Okay.
I mean, that's why he looked at that as being real as opposed to personal.
Whereas the travel moves around.
Oh, yeah.
We just wanted to make you aware of these issues. They're potential options for the city council to look at in the future. We're heading in a direction where, whether you look at one day rebuilding Front Street or something, you may need more resources for the infrastructure in your downtown area, and these are just options that Wayne and Thomas identified, and we felt compelled to let you know that they were out there, and we don't have any emergency or reason to move quickly on them. Okay.
I hope we'll revisit this very quickly, and I would like to add it to our workshop agenda if we're going to be meeting on the 25th. Or, no, it wasn't the 25th. It was, yes, it was.
I just mentioned one other thing, the process itself, we might be looking to hire the city attorney to do this and their staff at a cost, I got a price quote of about $1,000 for doing both TIF districts. There's a required public hearing. You'd be looking at anywhere from 30 to 90 days to do our end of things, and then DECD will take up to 60 days to approve the TIF amendment. So you'd be looking at anywhere from 3 to 5 months from start to finish to make these changes. And city attorney may be the best approach.
Mike?
As we found out, having a TIF is a great thing, and I remember when we did it, it was a really conceptual thing, that it was, someday we might be able to, get something, and year after year we'd be going, is there anything in that TIF? No, there isn't, And then all of a sudden, whoa, there's a lot in that TIF, and it's paying for the walkway, and so I think there's not a heck of a lot of downside, except for the people in the surrounding towns who seem to benefit by our high valuation, and and that's not my concern. I like having those things isolated. So I support moving this stuff along, certainly so that we get it done sooner than later.
As you do have a very long list of potential projects in the downtown, this might be the best way to pay for as much of that as possible using these funds, so we should take advantage in this particular case.
Okay. Thank you, Thomas.
Yep, sure.
Okay. Accept and award a bid for the Front Street, Miller Street sewer improvements?
Yes, we've designed and set out to accomplish two things. One, to improve the quality of the lines, the size of the lines, and the bend of the lines at the bottom of Commercial Street and at the bottom of Miller Street, where they all run into a same line, which is called an interceptor, and it's a fairly flat line going from the boathouse over towards Miller Street, gravity-fed. There's two components in this. The first part of the bid was to do all the line size increasing and the line angle changing, and that's the big part of the bid. The smaller part of the bid was the pump house by the boathouse to create both a mechanism that would force sewage away from the boathouse in times of high flows so we don't have backups at the boathouse, which we've had. It also installs a check valve so that flow that backs up cannot back up into the boathouse. I originally was recommending in my manager's report last week that we only award the work for the increasing the size of the lines and the changing of the angles of the lines so that the gravity-fed flows would work better than they have for both Miller Street and Commercial Street in the future. In further conversations with the city engineer, Oliver Associates, as well as John Carmen, the city's superintendent of the sewer department, I have been persuaded that we're really better off putting in a pump station at this point in time at the boathouse to prevent it from having any backups at all. And also, they assured me that if down the road, 5, 10, 15 years from now, the city decides to build additional bathrooms down there within 150 feet or so, it would be easier to run a line right to that pump station. It would, and to make sure that those bathrooms were also protected by the same pump station. So what I would like is I would like the council to accept the 6 awards as provided and award the bid to Nitram Excavation for both the base bid as well as the alternate bid in a total amount of $179,036. The funding of this will come from the sewer surplus. That's where we are.
So moved. Second.
Any more discussion? Seeing none, take it to a vote. Thank you. That's all you needed on that, right?
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay, J1 is tents, Mike Ed?
Oh, yeah.
I've sent you guys this was an outfit that plans bike trips across the country for people, either starting in Maine or starting in Seattle. And aside from the fact that they have a route that takes them either way, across the Armistice Footbridge, through the downtown, and then up Main Street Hill and out 52, or back the other way through the downtown and over the bridge. I ran into them. They run a very small amount of groups a year, and in talking with them, the topic came up if they could find a place to camp in the downtown, they'd be, and I said, well, what about Armistice Heritage Park? They loved the idea, but obviously we'd need to approve it. Jim Bell raised a couple of questions, good questions. Other counselors have said, that we don't want to set a precedent and turn it into a campground. We've really never done it, so I only think of this as maybe a one-time shot as to see how it goes, see how it works out. It's 13 people, and so that they are en route right now. Friday, they were 650 miles away, and if we do it this time, then we can review how it worked, and so that's why I'm bringing it forward at this point.
Any discussion? I need a motion, or what's your favorite?
I'd like to have a viewpoint of our resident biker.
Well, I tell you, I know there's been some probable disagreement. Haven't spoken to any of you about this, but the area that I talked about having the barbecue that we had yesterday, I don't know what we're looking to do as a city or what precedent we're concerned, and I'm sure there are precedents, and I respect that. But one night for 8 tents, I think says a lot, in a good way, about our relationship with bikers to our town. We have a hiking, biking, and pedestrian committee. I don't see the sense of 8 tents sheltering up for one night as a bad experiment. We got approval, the schools graces, and our city parks to have a 4,000 or however many fully catered, full-on high-end tour. This doesn't sound like that to me, but as a biker, it speaks volumes about the city's pleasantries for one night. I think it's an easy yes. I'm not worried about consequences myself. The Trek, the Trek is a non-profit. These guys are for-profit, I presume.
Right. That's the difference.
Yeah. So we let people park in our city parking lot overnight with their RVs, I think. We don't charge them for that, right? So maybe we could just have them camp their tents.
We do?
In the parking lot.
I don't encourage camping.
But I've heard we've had people do that. So I'm not trying to stir up a tempest. I didn't think of it as commercial or increments of allowing people into our city. I want people to come into our city.
I wish we had a city campground.
Yeah, I don't know.
Heritage Park.
We have, I don't see it as a big issue. Now, maybe I'm missing a larger point. I probably am, but I am a biker, and anybody going across the country, if they want to park and camp one night in our town in September,
You're not a biker.
let them. I'm not a motorcyclist. I'm not a bicyclist. But.
Nancy, then Mike.
Okay. I have some real concerns about this. I used to walk my dog, my late dog, in City Park, and there were times during the summer when there was a gentleman who camped in the pavilion. And once I realized that, I started walking the dog somewhere else because he was a transient. And I know that these people are not the same kinds of people. However, if you can't have someone camping in the city park, I don't think that allowing a for-profit organization to let 8 people camp right downtown in Heritage Park is a good way to, is a good way to go. I think it's setting a precedent that it's going to be difficult in the future to figure out, what to do next.
No, Mike, then you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a difference between a bum and a park.
However,
as a bicyclist, I follow, and I do. That's why I say, do this as an experiment, see how it works with Jim Bell, as report back. What was it like? What was the impact, et cetera, and maybe we'll find, well, there were problems or there weren't, but so. I would just make it in the form of a motion to approve it, to refer them to coordinate with Jim Bell and just allow it on a one-time use and see what happens.
We have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion, Roger?
I like the idea, I think it was, I'm not sure who made the point, maybe it was Eric, that there ought to be a place in the city where this is permitted. It seems to me we ought to invite this kind of tourism to the city, and but I'm not sure that Heritage Park is the place. So I don't know what to say. I do think it would really be nice to have Belfast be a place where bike tours can stop and camp, and that's a good thing. So
we have Shepherd's Park.
What?
We have the park out on Shepherd Road.
Oh, Sportsman.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm a biker and I go by there, don't.
No?
They don't want to be there, but...
You can't even get in there in the mud. And then there's deer stands, right? Remember?
You build a cabin.
No, if I can make a point, well, I mean, yesterday when we were having this barbecue, there was a homeless guy down in Heritage Park. And my 4-year-old walked by him on the way to the paddleboarders who are having a little expo because there's 30 people suddenly down having a barbecue, and they're inviting people to try their paddleboarding, which apparently they're going to come before the council as a secondary business, all probably not to do with us having a barbecue, but with probably the Front Street Shipyard and the Harbor Walk coming in. I mean, so you're going to have all kinds of people. We already have people sleeping in the park down there, that's my point. I don't know, Mike, if it's the location that people are against, but you have Wales Park is hugely underutilized and flat. So I don't know what I agree with Roger that we need a designated spot, because I don't think we're that big a city. Maybe I'm wrong. I would like to think we're not that big a city that we can't say to 8 tents for one night, sure, come experience our city. And that's my dilemma. I like the fact that we can do that.
Well, I do too. I'd love to have it. I'd like to have people hiking, but
yeah.
Stop here. So, and camping is something that some groups need. They're not on a budget. This for-profit organization can't run if they have to put up people in, the hotels every night. So, but Mike, I guess I don't really, as much as I want to say yes, the idea that it's an experiment, well, the next group is going to be the same issue. I mean, they're going to be using Heritage Park. It's a for-profit group in one of our really pretty key parks.
Well, we've already said, so you mean yes to whatever it is, the Tour de Maine with 300 tents over in Steamboat Landing. I mean, they're going to have 2,000 people, or how many people, or
next year.
How many?
They're coming, they're going to make a proposal for the next council meeting, September 18th.
So
I don't know about that one. Maybe I heard about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the
Trek across.
They're going to have
Trek Across Maine, not
Right.
Trek Across Maine. It's like it's
And
Maine.
it's camping.
Oh.
Camping.
Oh, yeah, they're going to camp
It's
on the
Steamboat.
fields, the baseball.
No, that's the
That's
tour.
Velo Quebec.
Okay,
That's the Velo Quebec. The other one is, they want to camp on Steamboat Landing
Like me.
with 300 tents. And they'll be here next week, or 2 weeks from now.
And the trek ends
But
here.
well,
The destination city.
I just see it as a small thing, so.
You know,
And every night, by the way, if you go down there right now, there's dozens of people camping out in our harbor on boats.
That's right.
So, you know, somehow we managed to accommodate them.
Do it all the time.
you know, we did the same experimental process when it came to having alcohol in the park and we said we'd try it, and we tried it, and it was fine, and I think, I do think that if it's a for-profit group, that we ought to think about charging something.
Joe?
I just wanted to know, Mike, when you talked to Jim Bill, did he say anything about the Parks and Recreation Commission and how they felt about people camping in the parks?
No.
Just because the Parks and Recreation Commission is pretty conscientious about the parks, and if I do something as city manager that they feel I did discuss with them, they let me know, and I don't blame them.
We should know.
So I just don't know if they had any thoughts on this at all, and I know Jim asked.
Does it? I don't think, can't support something that hasn't been run by the Parks Commission.
Because I think when we did the alcohol in the parks, we did ask the Parks and Rec Commission about how they felt about it. And I just don't want toes inadvertently stepped on, that's all. I've done it, and
He didn't mention it. He thought it wasn't a big deal, and,
Okay.
you
Because
know.
I haven't mentioned it to him.
When are they going to get here, in the next few days?
You're going to be here September 17th.
This is the night before our next council meeting.
I would say run it by them if they're all right with it.
When's their next meeting, Joe? Right off.
I don't know if they're the second or third Thursday.
Oh, good.
When is it?
13.
But they probably have to plan in advance.
Could we pass it based on them reviewing it and
Contingent on?
contingent on their, you know, but these people are on their way, and honestly, I didn't realize we could get wrapped around an axle about it, but,
It's a derailer.
you know, I'd like to somehow be able to let them know what's going on.
Mike, if they didn't have our park to camp in, where would they camp? Would they
They'd probably
skip
go to a
Belfast?
campground, you know, that's,
Or would they, is the point that they would just ride through Belfast?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're not gonna like sneak in your backyard or something.
No, but is there a campground that they camped at last year? I'm just curious, where would they go?
I don't know, they were specifically asked, they were saying it would be great if they could be in town, because, you know,
Yeah, it would be great.
yeah.
Nancy?
I can just see some taxpayer, Belfast taxpayer, who decides that they have overflow guests some weekend and send their brother-in-law and all of his kids down to the park, because after all, you know, we've allowed it for, I mean, really, I mean, it just seems to me that we're setting a precedent here that we shouldn't be setting.
I think they could come in the council meeting and ask for it, but they couldn't send their brother-in-law down to the park with a tent. But they could ask for it, and maybe it'd be a little embarrassing if we said no.
I think there's too much thinking about this.
So I made the motion,
The
and
motion's already out there?
I would amend it to
Contingency up on the...
contingent on, you know, any issues with the Parks and Rec.
I'm going to support it, and just because it's just one time, and not really an experiment, but
I think that you ought to put a contingent on this, that we will viciously look at finding a place for this kind of activity to happen.
That's not a bad idea.
yeah.
And where we don't have a place at this particular time, that's
maybe something that schools can provide, because
You know, they ought to be a place where gatherings like that can come with the city, that we can say yes, and the city manager can say, yes, you can come in. It shouldn't even have to go to this level and this much talk about it. But we get to find that spot, and,
Yeah, no offense to Shepherd's Park, none meant. It's 4 miles outside town.
so what, you got a bicycle?
So my point is, Walter.
Pedal, so I
Dear
pedal.
Mayor, my point is they probably won't have the ambionic experience out there that they might have in town.
Well,
And I think that's a fair statement to make.
I'm having an embryonic experience right now.
A canoe launching place up there on the river.
Why don't we send them right into town with open arms?
Waterfall Arts.
Waterfall Arts will probably put them up. I mean, there's, you know.
Can we move it? Move the
Well,
question?
yeah, you want to amend your motion to?
I did, yeah, I think.
I'll second the amendment if that is needed.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Okay. The second one is to do with wind, something, Joe?
Yeah, last Friday morning, I got a letter from Statoil, which is a Norwegian company who's proposing to build 4 pilot deepwater offshore wind-powered turbines in Maine, doing their own research to try and see whether or not, in the long run, it can supply power not only in Maine, but to the Northeast power grid. They've got a proposal in front of the PUC. It's a huge amount of money. Part of what they have to do with the PUC is they have to ask, this is a research and development thing that's being worked on with the university and with a lot of other private businesses in Maine. But they're trying to get the PUC to approve their proposal. And they've asked us to write letters of support for their proposal. In fairness, their proposal, as best as I understand it as I see here today, is that they're asking for the PUC to pay a rate hike, a rate increase for this electricity so produced. It'll produce about 12 megawatts of power. The state of Maine uses about 1,600 megawatts a year, so to give you a sense of how little power produced. But they say if they agree to this, it'll pay it'll be a rate increase for Maine households of less than $0.50 per year per capita, across the board. So in order to make this project go, they've got to get some money in to help pay for the revenue, or to help pay for the electricity they produce. They're investing, they're asking the state to invest. So this is part of the state's whole program to try and build offshore energy, and they've asked us to write letters, and unfortunately, they've got to be written by Friday. So I don't have a lot of elbow room here.
These towers are located where?
So they're going to be built, these are in a research area approved by the state off Booth Bay, about 9 miles out to sea.
Yep.
I just don't know, shall we write a letter of support for this application?
Having gone to the event, Dr. Hippie, I think it was, with Joe and Louis Baker.
Yep.
I know this is, I don't want to say this is lost prevalence or force, but at the time, I was convinced that, and still am, that this is a major down-the-road historical thing that's going to happen offshore, out of your eyes, line of vision. It could take 30 years, it could take 40, but I support it, and I would encourage it. I know that we've had questions about whether we would be any type of major player, but I think it would be so wide and so widespread that there'd be lots of opportunities in coastal Maine. I'm not saying we write the letter for that reason. Statoil is also the international company that, Joe, you met with Thomas down in Portland.
Yes.
And you said that was about a year ago, and
Yes.
you said they were for real and you were very impressed.
They're the only company in the world today with floating platform technology.
70% owned by the government of Norway. So, I mean, I totally support it, a letter supporting it.
I support it because it moves the wind to where it belongs, away from where humans live.
I support it.
There you go.
I'll leave this out.
So I'll send a letter in support for that this week.
Okay. I'm going to wait on the executive session. I'm going to sign in of council orders. Here they come. Open to the public. Anybody there want to say anything? Don't see that happening. Communications.
Yeah, sorry, I had to step out for a second. If I could give a quick update on the RSU withdrawal. The town of Belmont met tonight. They actually voted and formed a committee. They are supporting withdrawal. Sorry to jumpstart you there, Ben. The vote was 12 to 4.
Oh, great.
3 to 1. 12 to 4. Searsmont vote was 54 to 9. So,
Wow.
the point is, they will be at the September 10th meeting with their committee, which will probably not even be recognized by that time, since they were just approved tonight. But that's great news for continual look at the old SAD 34 as an option.
May I ask one question?
Yes.
You talked about early September as a time to form a negotiating team that would work, perhaps.
Well, we talked about September 4th, which was today, as a deadline, and at our last meeting, we made the determination to extend that to at least next Monday. We got some information from the Department of Education that the other towns are going to be receiving. I haven't quite heard. We've had some people say, well, let's put this off for a year, et cetera. The towns that have voted may ask for a 90-day extension. That's it. They have to form a plan within within a total with an extension of 180 days, that then their towns need to vote on for withdrawal. So their best plans for a withdrawing would include a new RSU or a standby.
Do we as a city council need to do anything for that?
Stand by for negotiations at some point. So we figured at the last meeting that, and I'm sorry we haven't had a council meeting since, we figured that even with extending it to next Monday or Tuesday, the plan in itself looks to be 5 pages, and we feel we can create the plan needed to get approval in less than a week. So the longer we wait for the surrounding communities to come to the understanding that they actually voted on withdrawing and forming committees, we'll extend that time. And we still feel relatively confident, Joe, that we can get our proposal in by October 23rd.
I just want to remind the public that your committee is trying to formulate a plan of how you would withdraw.
Right.
And to put all the bells and whistles to it, the dollars, the costs, the expenses. Once you put that together, you show it to the Commissioner of Education, who decides whether they think
it's viable
or not. If the Commissioner says it is, then the dollar values and the impacts identified get presented back to the broad voters for a decision.
And before that, there would be public sessions, public meetings. We'd put it on websites, put the plan together. So our hope is that the old SAD 34 would be a part of that. So thank you, Belmont.
Okay.
We on communications? Yeah. 2 quick things. I drive by it every day, and Joe, you mentioned it today. Public Works Department went in and leveled that area where they're going to move the ice skating rink to, and it looks terrific, and they did a great job, and I really appreciate it. And we'll have the lights and everything will be in the right place next year. We mentioned that freezer today. I was just amazed last week to learn 40 employees they've got working at the new freezer down there, and I think it's just remarkable.
I think those are not 40 year-round employees.
Right. Well,
I mean, it's so important. It's impressive.
Yeah, and they're coming to the planning board, I believe, about maybe adding another freezer. It's a real success, and they're off. It's really remarkable, and it's terrific. So that's it.
Anyone else? Communications? Seeing none, Joe, executive session?
I need a motion to go to executive session to discuss union negotiations.
So moved.
Second.
Can I just have a quick discussion on that? Are we going to have are we going to continue our meeting in a workshop, or we're not doing that tonight? There was some talk about talking about
Tonight, too late.
design review.
Right, it's whatever your pleasure is. Is it,
I'm not, as you know, I'm leaving town, won't be back for a while, so all my input on it.
10 o'clock.
Thanks, you can.
Tonight's the night.
We got a motion, all in favor going in?